Hello and welcome to Hotel Optimization Part 3. My name is Amy Vaxman. I am Vice President of QuestX Hospitality. Today's virtual event, powered by Hotel Management and the International Hospitality Investment Forum, is the third virtual installment of our typically in-person hotel optimization event. And we are happy to announce that we are planning to return to the traditional format in just a few months. Mark your calendars for June 30th at the JW Marriott Miami Turnberry Resort and Spa in Florida. The one-day conference will feature 8 panels in a compact time frame in a single setting. More information and registration will be coming soon. As at our previous hotel optimization events, we would like to recognize the resilience, innovation, and community spirit shown by dedicated members of the hospitality sector at all levels as we navigate through the pandemic and downturn. We are confident better times are on the way. We are partnering on hotel optimization with AHOA, which is continuing to advocate for its members and the hotel industry at large as we work our way toward the recovery. Here to say a few words is Cecil P. Staton, AHOA's President and CEO.
Hello, I'm AHOA President and CEO, Cecil Staton. AHOA is pleased to partner with Hotel Management to bring you this important hotel ROI online event, Hotel Optimization Part 3. Our industry continues to face our greatest challenge in a generation, but there is light at the end of the tunnel. As our nation and our industry embark on the road to recovery, there's a great degree of uncertainty surrounding what that will look like and when things will be back to normal. We have vaccines, and there's a new administration in Washington that has pledged to vaccinate 100 million people in 100 days. Now, the biggest question on everyone's mind is, where do we go from here? Over the next 3 days, you'll hear from industry experts who will help make sense of different recovery forecasts, government stimulus programs, and public health initiatives. This valuable series offers critical insight into how we can hit the ground running as America reopens. It's our goal to help you position your business for success and return to profitability as a cautious public begins traveling again. Virtual meetings and greetings are a good way to stay connected during the crisis, but hospitality is not a virtual industry. I look forward to the time when we can all see each other in person again. As an industry, we are here for each other, and events like Hotel Optimization will help us remain connected, strong, and prepared to revitalize hospitality.
Thanks for that update, Cecil. Here's a quick schedule of today's events. Session 1, Stick or Twist, a discussion about whether it's time to sell or take a long-term view. Session 2, Technology, Are You With IT? Which will focus on what hotels need to know about how technology can help with leaner operations. Session 3, a look at insurance, lawsuit, and risk management. Session 4, Where the Opportunities Are, a look at the transaction market in the first half of the year. A few technical notes before we begin today. If you would like to view the day's agenda, please click on the Agenda tab on the left side of your screen. If you miss any session, the event is being recorded and will be available on demand within 48 hours after the event concludes. Each panel will include a question and answer period, so please add your questions for the panelists on the left side of your screen in the Q&A tab. You will find it next to the Chat tab. In that same area on the left side of your screen, you will find various handouts and resources from our sponsors. And now let's get started with our first panel, Stick or Twist, which is being moderated by Skylar Cooper, First Vice President of Investments, the Hospitality Division of Marcus & Millichap.
Hello and good morning or afternoon, depending on which part of the world you're joining us from. And welcome to part 3 of Hotel Optimization's virtual event. My name is Skylar Cooper. I'm the First Vice President with Marcus & Millichap and the former National Director for Mark Stamilichat's Hospitality Division. It is my absolute pleasure to be the host of this panel for the next 40 minutes. As you probably know, we are joined by a star-studded group that will help me discuss various topics amongst the hotel investment world and the lingering effects of COVID-19 as we move into 2021. Before we get started, I want to have everybody introduce themselves and their firms. I'm going to go ahead and start with Rachel. If you would, introduce yourself and HEI Hotels.
Sure. Thank you so much, Skylar. My name is Rachel Moniz. I'm the Executive Vice President of Operations for HEI Hotels and Resorts. Good morning, everyone.
Thank you for that. Biren, the floor is yours. Would you introduce yourself and your role in AHOA?
Yeah, good morning, Skylar. My name is Biren Patel. I'm the chairman of AHOA. AHOA is the largest hotel owners association here in the United States. We have nearly 20,000 members whom own almost 1 out of every 2 hotels here in the United States. On the personal side, I'm a partner in BHP Investments Company. We own and operate hotels in multiple cities here in Texas. Thank you for having me, Quest Texan Hotel.
Excellent. Sar, the floor is yours. Oxford Capital Group.
Thank you. Yes, I'm with Oxford Capital Group and Oxford Hotels and Resorts. We are an owner-operator based in Chicago with a nationwide focus on large-scale acquisitions, developments, redevelopments. We specialize in independent hotels, but also have great relationships with the national chains. And we also have a senior housing arm where we own and operate primarily assisted living, independent living, and memory care. And we also do a fair amount of mixed-use projects, which will sometimes include apartments and retail.
Excellent. Last but not least, Brian Waldman with Peachtree Hotels. How are you this morning?
Good morning, doing well. Hope everyone else is. Thank you for having me today. My name is Brian Waldman. I'm the Executive Vice President of Investments at Peachtree Hotel Group. We are a fully integrated investment management platform focused on the hotel space. We are hotel owners, operators, developers. We have a hotel lending company called Stonehill that finances hotels. And we have sort of our asset management arm that raises capital primarily through fund vehicles to invest in hotels. We primarily invest in premium branded select service and compact full service hotels throughout the country.
Excellent. So we've got just under 40 minutes. Let's go ahead and kick it off. I want to dive right into the debt side of the business. Rachel, have you seen the debt markets open up at all, or are they remaining tight across the board?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the debt markets are still challenging. We've seen no CMBS activity, and traditional banks are still, very conservative in their underwriting. Debt funds are more readily engaging, although their spreads are still around 600 basis points over LIBOR for 65% LTC deals. So, they are still looking for borrowers to deposit 12 to 18 months, or debt service reserves and operating loss reserves are requiring, 18 to 24 months of yield maintenance. So that said, though, we are beginning to see spreads come in a bit and reserve obligations being replaced by, fund level guarantees. So signs of lenders leaning in a bit more on deals they can, get excited about, are beginning to show.
Excellent. Sar, I'm going to kind of switch over to you. Are you seeing kind of a similar scenario in the debt market as well?
Yeah, I would say early in the downturn, it was in many ways similar to the early part of the great financial crisis, where there really wasn't any debt available. And the good news is, I think bank balance sheets are in better shape right now. So we did start to see some activity. I think one of the more notable transactions that people followed was Wells Fargo wrote some paper on the Marriott in Napa, which was interesting. So it was nice to see banks starting to do some deals. Now, they're being extremely selective, right? It has to be the markets that they like, with the sponsorship they like, the projects in those markets. But it was nice to see at least some activity. Another notable transaction the Fairmont in downtown San Francisco, which UOB did, an international bank. So that was, again, nice to see. As Rachel mentioned, the debt funds are being more active. It's more expensive. 600 over LIBOR, I think, is probably the lower end of what some of those will charge. I mean, I've heard quotes into the low double digits. So, it's sort of desperate times for certain borrowers, and if they can't get the attention of some of the more attractive debt, that's what's available right now. So I've also heard some people taking advantage of materially lower leverage senior debt, marrying that up with some mezz debt. That's one approach. And I thought this was pretty interesting. We haven't done this, but there's some ground lease opportunities that come with call options. So as the market comes back, you can basically collapse the leasehold into a fee interest. I thought that was really interesting. But again, we haven't pursued that, but it was interesting that people are starting to get creative right now to try and figure out liquidity in a time of uncertainty.
Brian, I know that Stone has their own arm. Bjorn, did I cut you off? Sorry.
No, I just wanted to add to the other panelists. I have some buddies who are in the banking business, and they were saying to me that even though it's been tight across the board, they've done a pretty good amount of lending during this pandemic. They have pretty much, the leverage, as the other panelists, as Sar said, where the interest rates are higher, the down payment has gone up to 30-40%. There's a need from the borrower side. They are lending during this time. It's just become a little bit more tighter.
Excellent. Great perspectives. Brian, I know that you're involved in some unique financing options for hoteliers in various situations. Would you elaborate on, I guess, what your company kind of does in that space, as well as some other creative financing options that are available out there?
Yeah, absolutely. And from what we're seeing, we definitely see and agree with a lot of the comments that the other panelists have made this morning. I think from our perspective, lending is definitely tight. I think a lot of the balance sheet lenders are still on the sidelines, and the debt funds are definitely the most active. One of the things that we've been hearing with a lot of, our lending relationships and the loan officers is, on one hand, they can't go in and ask for forbearance and, extensions and all this other stuff. And, in the same meeting, ask to originate new loans from their credit committee. So I think there's a bit of a disconnect, and I think you're slowly starting to see lenders get back in the market. But I also think it's very much a situation of the haves and the have-nots. If you have great banking relationships, you've been doing repeat business with the same lenders, you have deposits on accounts, you're likely going to be some of the first borrowers that they bank. If you're out trying to develop new relationships, it's a really tough time to get that done today. In terms of creative financing, I think there are a number of options and opportunities out there today. We've been spending a lot of our time. Stonehill has historically been more of a bridge lender. It's a debt fund, and really fits into that box. But we've been historically more of a bridge lender that does shorter term bridge financing, mezzanine financing, preferred equity investments, and we continue to do that. But where we're really seeing a lot of activity is what I call runway capital, where you have a fundamentally good borrower, a fundamentally good asset. It's not over leveraged, but the borrower is just tapped out. They don't have the cash liquidity reserves to keep pumping into the asset, where we can come in. We've done it behind CMBS, we've done it behind bank lenders, where we can come in a preferred position and provide some additional, what I'll call runway capital, to get to the other side of this. The other place that we've been very active is through Stonehill. We also have a PACE lending division. We've been very active on the PACE side. And with PACE, there's also a subset of PACE called retroactive PACE. So if you're in a PACE eligible district or a PACE eligible state, and you've built your hotel in the last few years, you may be able to go and put retroactive PACE on your property, which is effectively, it's an assessment. It's paid per pursuit with your property taxes. But it's very, very attractive cost financing. I mean, it's typically in, the 6% range. It's 30-year money, fully amortizing. So, we've been very active in California, for example, and a handful of other states doing retroactive PACE in the current market. We have seen the ground lease opportunities that was mentioned earlier. For us, that's not really a fit, but we have seen it. We know groups that are working on it. I think there are, certain challenges that come along with that. But I think if you have, a great asset in an urban market, it's definitely something to consider.
Excellent. Baron, I'm going to toss you a question from the audience. Are there instances where franchise affiliation might have a negative effect on getting loans or favorable terms?
I think that, pre-COVID, if you had, you're trying to get a loan with a reputable brand, it might help, right? Right. I think at this point in time, it doesn't play that big of a part. I think, as Brian mentioned earlier, that it goes back to the relationships that you've built with your lenders in the past, the history that you have with them, I think plays a bigger role than the brand affiliation at this time. And then obviously the market that you're trying to acquire or get lending for, for that asset. But I think that relationships and history play a bigger role than the brand affiliation at this point in time.
Excellent. That's good insight. Speaking of brands, I'm gonna roll into kind of a brand discussion right now. I'll start with Rachel, but we'll open up to the group. Are there more franchises that in today's environment are more appealing to your firm?
Yeah, well, I mean, so I'll kind of answer this two ways. I think from an acquisition strategy perspective, the limited service, select service brands in secondary markets, they've held better value, right? Since they've been less impacted by shutdowns. We don't, HCI's portfolio, we don't have a lot of those of limited service hotels. The majority of our portfolio is your core, half our portfolio is the core branded hotels, and the other half is in the soft brand and independent space. Brands, there are still customers buying in their lanes, if you will. And so when we look at brand contribution, it's relatively high. It's 55-60% of the contribution, but it's all leisure. It's what we're finding is that the consumers are more attracted to the soft branded hotels that are in markets that maybe aren't as rigid in terms of the restrictions, or the hotels have some kind of activation that's more appealing, or they're locationally advantaged. So those are the hotels that are doing better than some of the core hotels, which of course a lot of core hotels, the hard branded hotels, are highly dependent on BT and group guests, and those are going to see a longer recovery period. So, that's part of the challenge.
Excellent. Brian, anything to add to that? I know that the focus is more in the limited service, select service, premier brands, but anything that you're kind of dialed in on brand-wise?
Yeah, I think just a couple of comments on this. I think the first is, when you're looking at a brand, the question is, why are you putting that brand on it? And brands have a cost associated with it. It's a real material cost. So what are you getting for your money? And, the brands that we tend to affiliate with, and if you look at our portfolio, we're highly concentrated in, two of the brand families. We'll invest across, probably four of them, and don't tend to go far outside of that. But the reason that we invest with the brand families that we invest in is because of what you get in return for those franchise fees. I think there's really two things. One is the question about financing came up before. And I think, again, we play mostly in the select service and compact full service space. It's very challenging to get financing today. And I think a lot of lenders are looking for certain brand families. If you come in with, and I'm not going to say any names on this call, but if you come in with one of the the top tier brands, I think you're more likely to get a deeper look from that lender in a time that's already challenging than if you come in with a weaker brand. On the flip side of that, or taking that a step further, coming back to the operations side, is, we look very closely at what we're paying, whether it's franchise fees or reservation contribution. And I mean, it's expensive. We all know it's expensive. But again, I think you get what you pay for. What we look at is, what are we getting back from the brands? So when you're investing with those top tier brands, I think you're getting much better system delivery and much higher contribution from brand.com and from their systems, from their corporate accounts, which are not only tend to be your highest rated business, but also on the cost side, your most efficient business, in terms of the fees that you pay relative to that. Whereas with other brands, and again, not picking on anyone specifically, I'm paying, whatever I'm paying for the franchise fee, but then I'm still getting the majority of my reservations through an OTA and paying the commissions on top of that. So in those cases, I don't think that you get the value. To me, the way that I look at it is I think there's a lot more value in what I'll call the brand family than the sub-brand. And I know we're going to talk about this a little bit later in the panel. But, when you look at the brand families, I think there's a lot of strength in, again, the .coms and, the brand platforms, as opposed to if you ask the average person on the street, they may or may not know the difference between, the sub-brands, even though, the brands will tell you there's a huge difference between some of the sub-brands, and a lot of people on this call understand what that is. I think that's almost secondary to the platform that you're on, and making sure that you're in the right platform that's going to give you the right contribution in the market that you're in.
I'm going to switch it over to start. So I know that there's a number of independent hotels in the portfolio. Is it more attractive now than ever for your group to start targeting independents, or has there been some reconsideration in looking at more traditional limited service, select service hotels?
Yeah, it's a good question. We like to keep an open mind when it comes to, we'll do brands of one, we'll do, in some cases, we'll do one of our own independent brand families. It could be the Godfrey Hotel or the Hotel Julian, London House. And we'll do soft brands and we'll do hard brands. It really just depends on the circumstances, the specific hotel. And we'll get really analytical in terms of trying to make assumptions around what is this particular brand family. I agree with some of the comments earlier that Brian was mentioning about the focus being on the brand family, the loyalty program, the res system, and we'll say, in many cases, that midweek business transient, right? That's where the brands can sort of help you and get a premium on occupancy and rate, and the leisure with the internet, GDS, right? We can access a lot of that demand. And the question is, what kind of rate premium, what kind of occupancy premium will the brands deliver? And we got to take into account all the fees, just the standards, right? Free breakfast for loyalty members. I mean, it adds up. And I also agree with Brian that in many cases, the cost is justified, right? These are powerful loyalty programs and res systems. The case against, I would say, and you had asked before what lenders might be thinking about as a negative with brands, and sophisticated lenders will acknowledge this, but the additional costs do add a level of risk. Your break-even RevPARs a little bit higher, right? When you have all of those costs, you have more operating leverage. And arguably you have more staying power if you don't have those expenses dragging you down. And especially right now, as Rachel mentioned, most of that demand is leisure driven, and that's going to change. I mean, I'm sure we'll talk about that later in the panel. That's going to change. The world we're living in right now is not here to stay. It's going to improve. But right now, the case for the brands in this sort of this current situation is a little bit tougher. And it's interesting, Rachel made the comment that the brand contribution in some cases 50-60%, but that's a misleading figure because it includes everything. If people are calling in through the call center, or if people are booking online, I mean, it's all it's very difficult to sort of isolate what demand would have come to my hotel anyway if I wasn't part of this brand family. So it's tough to say, but I would say, and it's interesting in terms of the debt. I still think even the current environment, as Brian mentioned, you will get better debt terms if you're part of one of these brand families. And when we financed the London house, which is part of the Curio collection by Hilton in Chicago, our lender actually gave us two options, right? Because we hadn't decided when we financed it whether we were going to go independent or whether we were going to do the soft brand. And it was a menu of two different options. The soft brand scenario actually had better proceeds and a lower spread. And then we ultimately went that direction and took advantage of that. So I think that's pretty telling, where a lender actually gave us a couple of different options.
Love it. For the record, the London House is my favorite hotel in Chicago. Been to it many, many times. Brian, it was probably about a year and a half ago. We're sitting live in an LA studio, and we're talking about brand proliferation. I think it took up 50% of our conversation. Is it still an issue, or have we slowed down? I can tell you from my perspective, I think there's only 2 or 3 brands that stick out that have been introduced compared to where every time you went to Alice, there was a laundry list of brands that the franchises were introducing.
Yeah, I do think it's still an issue, and I think it's a lag time issue. Whether you're talking about brands or brand proliferation, I think it comes down to whichever brand family you're talking about, their engine is only so big and creates so many reservations that they're pushing out to their hotels. I think we're at a point in the cycle today where for all of the new brands that have been rolled out in the last year or two, there's just a lack of construction financing. Most of those projects aren't breaking ground anytime soon. Most of those projects aren't getting financing. So, from that perspective, it's probably less of an issue of, someone's building in my backyard today, and that will change. And as an industry, we build and then we overbuild and then we talk about how we overbuilt and then the industry recovers and we start overbuilding again. So it will happen. But, the other point that I would make that I think is more relevant today is if you are part of one of the big brand families and you talk about the size of the engine, our hotels are sitting empty or close to empty. And, I think a lot of the reservations are either leisure or coming through the OTAs today. So when you talk about the size of the engine, the brands aren't able to fill up their hotels. And it's not really through fault of theirs. Like, no one predicted COVID. I mean, this is definitely a unique time. But I would tell you that if I'm, in an asset in a market and there's, my hotel and maybe one other hotel that comes off of that engine, I'm probably doing a lot better than if there are, 6 or 8 other hotels that are feeding off of that same engine. And, they might be slightly different. One might be extended stay, one might be transient, one might be boutique, but ultimately they're still feeding off of the same engine. So I think you do feel that brand proliferation today.
Excellent. Buren, I'm going to kind of stay on the brand proliferation topic and maybe try to shine a brighter light on it in a sense. Is there opportunity in existing hoteliers to convert and up brand where higher scale chain hotels are losing flags or shutting down?
Yeah, I think there is an opportunity. But before I get to that part, just as far in reference to brand proliferation, pre-COVID, it seemed like the last 4 or 5 years, hotel companies were launching brands, as you mentioned, and in the hotel community, there was concern. It was already a competitive market, and there was concern that it's going to become more competitive. But at the same time, when these hotel companies had launched these new brands, hotels would sign up real quick. Like, I'll give you some examples. When Hilton launched True, the first 3-4 months, hotels were signing up left and right. IAG, when they launched Avid, right? I mean, people were signing up. So then when hotel companies are trying to create more market segmentation and they have hotels signing up, they feel like they're making the right decisions. But I feel that, there's too many brands in the same space. It's causing at times consumer confusion. And then there's no major differentiators at times. And now I feel that as we're navigating out the road to recovery during this pandemic, we're going to see more of an impact of all these brands that have come, all the development that's happened. It's going to take us even longer to, come out to get to the pre-COVID numbers. Now, to answer your question, I think there is opportunity. There's opportunity where you can kind of downscale from a brand, an asset that might not be doing well, maybe in mid-scale select service, where you can maybe even go to kind of a higher end economy segment. if the price is right, because you're always going to have to do some kind of PIP, and you have to factor that in to see if it's the right conversion for you. And I think it's the market. As my panelists mentioned, the leisure market is going to come back sooner than some of the other industry segments or other markets. And so I think that if the price point is right, I think conversions could be a great avenue for a lot of our players.
Love it. Love it. Well, the key word I hear in that is opportunity. And so while there's so much negativity in our space right now, I think everybody on this panel sees opportunity. And I think that's something that's going to resonate with everybody as we continue to push through COVID-19 and this recovery. Let's change direction a little bit. Let's talk about our existing assets as a group. What are some of the items or some of the things we can do to refresh a property given limited liquidity at hotels right now? Sar, I'm going to open it with you, and then Rachel, if you'll join in as well.
Yeah, sure. So I would say, first of all, most hotels right now are in survival mode and trying to preserve cash. So unless there's some deferred maintenance item that's going to impact your operations, a leaky roof, a chiller that's about to go, I think most are kicking the can down the road. The contrarian approach, I think, would be construction costs are typically a bit lower during early in the recovery. And although we're not really seeing much reduction in construction costs, to be honest, in a lot of the urban areas, but hopefully that'll come. And also, if you're looking at it in terms of, hey, when's the best time to take rooms offline, maybe even shut down your hotel, the opportunity cost of doing that right now is arguably the lowest it's ever going to be. So there's certainly some rationale if you have the capital to knock out a renovation, if you know you're going to do that in the near term. I'd rather do it now than 2-3 years from now, where there's real opportunity cost for taking rooms offline. But what I would say, the highest impact areas that come to mind for me, the bathrooms are important. If you've got an old vanity, a small sort of vanity mirror, that can really transform the space. Tub to shower conversions. I'm a big fan of changing up flooring in guest rooms to a hard surface, right? It could be hardwood floors, it could be LVT, there's some luxury vinyl tile that's really high quality and lasts long. There's this perception of it being cleaner, and more than just perception, it is cleaner than carpet over time. And also, in our hotels, the food and beverage, the nightlife is a key component. These are high energy. Many of our hotels are high energy hotels, and those venues create a nice halo effect for the rest of the hotel. And we have to constantly be reinventing ourselves, staying relevant, not just in terms of the operations, but also in terms of the design. So, I think that's an area that if you have the cash, sort of re-envisioning spaces, and you're only doing that, it's times one, right? If you have a 200-room hotel, you're doing that in one space. It's if you change a vanity, you're doing that 200 times, right? So that can be a good sort of bang for the buck approach. But it really depends on the situation. You may not have the cash to do all of that at once, and you've got to just think through sort of where the bang for the buck is. If you have really tired bathrooms, that may be the place to spend the money, and will really improve the positioning and guest scores. So I think it's a case-by-case basis.
Right. Rachel?
Yeah, well, first of all, I agree with everything that Sar just said. That's, those are great points. I think just to add on to that, certainly just going back to food and beverage, and if you can, in this environment especially, but I think it's here to stay, is to expand your outdoor space and really build your outdoor space. We actually a couple of years ago made a goal for our food and beverage group to take our hotels in the Northeast or the Midwest that had outdoor spaces in the winter and try to do some things to program them. And so obviously we've really refocused on that, going into the winter months, and we've had a lot of success. So investing in things like igloos and getting those heated, and some additional lighting outside and FF&E. And we've been able to really expand, our season and continue to operate our food and beverage outlets. And I think what the most important thing is that really creates a point of differentiation for the consumer that is looking at a ton of hotels and, certainly looking on the OTAs, but it can create a little bit of a billboard effect. So if you've got a great image of your winter outdoor activations on Expedia, hopefully they'll then go back to your site and sort of explore and look into things more, and then make a to sell that room. So that would be a place that I would just outdoor space. The food and beverage spaces, I think, remain really important. As Sar said, they create that halo effect, and I think that that's really what in this pandemic, when so many things shut down, consumers are looking for the hotels that feel a little more normal and more like a full service hotel. So being able to have that offering and having it, making it a great experience, I think is important.
I just recently had my first igloo dining experience in Chicago, and to be honest with you, I enjoyed it. I was parking up in Chicago, but the whole experience to me was, you see it on TV as it's portrayed as this terrible experience. I enjoyed it. Every aspect of it. We left, my wife and I, with a good feeling. When it reactivates as an open area, I think just that process of how they adapted to the current environment makes me want to go back. So I love the creativity in the space, and I think it's something go back to the opportunity portion that we all talk about. Here's our opportunity to create very unique experiences that'll attract people long term and keep you coming. So we've only got about 8 minutes left. I'm going to kind of accelerate our discussion a little bit. When we're talking about amenities and the different services, a lot of them are going away. And so I'm going to open it for the group, either Beer and Brian. Are these amenities gone forever, or do we see them coming back? Brian, let's start with you.
Sure. I think things will change, but I'm a big believer in the pendulum. I think that, people are looking at the COVID world today and saying, we're getting rid of breakfast, we're closing this, we're closing that. And it works right now, but I think that so many of our guests have sort of come to expect that. And yes, some hotels will have it go away forever. And with all of the choices that are out there, customers will choose the hotels, the brands that give them the best experience. So I do think that we will get better and smarter and find ways to be a little bit more efficient with our business. I'm not a big believer that our world is fundamentally changing as a result of this, and people won't get on planes. I think even if you look at kind of what's going on in the world in corporate earnings right now, companies had a great year last year. A lot of companies did, not because the revenue side was so great, but because they were able to slash expenses. And I think that works in the short term. But the reason the revenues didn't fall off last year was because everything that they did for the last 3 or 5 or 7 or 10 years leading up to that, and people continued to spend money. So I think it's really important that we have a longer term view, and maybe not today, maybe not in the middle of COVID when we're fighting to survive and customer preferences have definitely changed. But I think those hotels that sort of lead the way to provide a better experience are going to be the faster hotels to recover and are going to do better longer term.
Excellent. Kieran?
Yeah, I think we covered a lot of points here in reference to me. Am I echoing?
It might have been me, but I'm muting myself, so far away.
Yeah, so I think Brian hit a lot of them, a lot of points. But I think that what I've seen from the brands is that as the relief that they're giving at this time, I think as they see an upward trajectory in our industry, they're going to start bringing some of the stuff that they had pre-COVID, the mandates and requirements back. I mean, we talked about breakfast. Breakfast has been a hot topic amongst not only our membership, but the industry, because year over year, that cost has gone up and more items are being required by each brand to stay competitive, with other brands. And so while they've given some kind of relief now, even housekeeping and so forth, I think that these things start coming back. Even though some owners don't want all of it to come back, I think for the brands to stay competitive, we're going to start bringing it back slowly. And that is something that I hear from hoteliers all the time, that if we need to change to the new norm, not just for the short term, but for the long haul, because it's a new way of doing business now, new way of operating hotels, and we all need to adapt, and so do brands.
Skylar, you're muted.
Wonderful. Sticking with my consumer point of view, I think as brands and different hotels implement new technology, as a consumer, I think it creates, again, another experience where you're exploring different technology, using the phone to get into your room. I just did that last time staying at a hotel. And so all of this stuff to me is it's fun. I'm on the road and I'm exploring. So as long as I think hoteliers continue to have this opportunistic view, I think we're going to be okay in this road to recovery. We'll be able to manage through. So we've got about 3 minutes left. And what I'd like to do is give everyone 30 seconds to a minute. What's the outlook for 2021 for your firm and for yourself?
I'm happy to go first. I would say, I think what's nice to see in the last, few days really, is a lot of these stay-at-home orders in Illinois, California, they've now been lifted, which I think is an indication that we're past this whole winter holiday surge period, which is fantastic, right? Because last 3 weeks have been brutal, right? Everybody's watched the numbers, capacity in hospitals, it's been horrible, and it's now getting a little bit better. So that's a positive. I like what I'm reading in terms of the new administration, in terms of renewed focus on working with the states to get the vaccine out. And, it'll probably continue to be bumpy over the next several months, but it's headed in the right direction. So that's a positive. We talked about how leisure is probably going to be the first to come back. Savings rates are very high, historically record high saving rates. A lot of pent up demand. And I think that's also going to help us on the food and beverage and nightlife side, where most of our demand is actually local, but people want to get out, right? They're sick of staying in their homes. And, I think that's a meaningful part of our business. So we're excited about that. Business transient, once travel restrictions at the company level, right, start to be lifted, I think that's hopefully going to start happening at the end of the year. And there's definitely pent-up demand there. And then one thing that's interesting on the group side, we've been following this. Most of the markets that we're in still have group business on the books in 2021. And what's happened is, since the pandemic hit, on a rolling basis, there's been cancellation. So it'll be interesting to see if any of that sticks later in the year as the vaccines start to get rolled out and infection rates come down. So.
Excellent.
So that's a long-winded way of saying I have no idea.
I love it. So we got basically about a minute or two left. Let's just go down the line. Brian, are we fully recovered within the next 24 months, or are you prepared for much longer than that?
I think it's hard to say if we'll be fully recovered. I mean, the one thing that we don't have control over is, COVID is what it is. The vaccine rollout is going to take time. And, from our perspective, we think that the second half of this year will obviously be a lot stronger than the first half. And I agree with the comment about significant pent-up demand. One thing that I think we need to keep in mind as an industry is 2019 was a record year, but so is 18, 17, 16, 15. We were really operating at a peak. So Do we need to get back to 2019 levels? Yeah, I want to. But even if we're operating at 17 or 18 levels, I think the majority of us are going to be okay. I think for us, and we're probably a bit more investment focused as opposed to, or at least I'm more investment focused as opposed to some of my panelists that are more operations focused. From the investment side, I will tell you that we have been extremely active. Just where we're investing is changing. We have not been very active on the acquisition side. I don't think that there's a lot of great acquisition opportunities out there. Few and far between. I think there's still a big bid-ask spread. I think debt is still an issue. People talk about, this wave of transactions that's coming. And, as a buyer, I hope it does. I'm not convinced that it will. We've been much more active on the debt side, with our bridge lending program, with the runway capital that I described before, with PACE lending. We've actively been acquiring notes. So I think that there are opportunities, and I think that, this is just really a crazy time in our industry that we've never seen before. And it's about being creative and, and finding those opportunities. Our industry will recover. It always does. And, if it's 24 months or 36 months, we'll be having this conversation about how we're back up at, a new industry peak. We'll get there. It's just hard to say when, but I think we're moving in the right direction.
Love it. Buren, and then Rachel, and we'll wrap this up.
I'll make it quick. We were the first ones for this pandemic to hit. Our industry was the first one. We'll probably be the last ones to recover. And from 9/11 till now, this pandemic has hit us probably 10 times worse. But I will tell you this, that we are a resilient industry. We'll get through this sooner than later. We're good at, pivoting and adjusting, and like no other. So this will be like no different. Hopefully we get out of this sooner than later. Thank you again.
Thanks, Buren. Rachel, take us home.
Yeah, well, just for HEI, first of all, I agree with with everything the panelists said, and just for us, despite a really challenging year in 2020, HEI did on the acquisition of a couple of hotels, and we saw organic growth from both existing and new capital relationships. While we haven't seen a tidal wave of deals yet, we do expect transaction volume to pick up as distress. It's going to force lenders to take action and borrowers to shed a few hotels to stay afloat with the rest of their portfolios. So, our investment team has definitely seen activity pick up this year already, and we expect to be very active with our capital partners in 2021. So we're a little bit more optimistic.
Excellent. That is all the time we have. I want to thank everybody for joining us on this hotel optimization virtual event. Looking forward to seeing everybody very soon. Thank you.
That was a great discussion. Thanks, Skylar and panel, for your insights. Before we begin panel 2, we have a 5-minute break. Welcome back. Technology, Are You With IT? Is next, and it is moderated by Diane Essner, founder of Danny Enterprises. Don't forget to add your questions to the Q&A tab on the left side of your screen.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for our conversation. We're going to be talking about leaner operations and the impact of what we're dealing with in the hospitality industry today, and actually moving forward with some leaner thinking. The title of the session is Technology, Are You With IT? And we have an esteemed panel. And if we can, let's go ahead and share some introductions. Scott, if you want to start, and just share a little bit about yourself and your background, and then we'll get this started.
Well, thank you very much. When you said esteemed panel, I looked over my shoulder to see if somebody had joined us. Really appreciate that, and it's good to see Neil and Brian again as well. So Scott Strickland, CIO for Wyndham Hotels and Resorts. I've been with Wyndham for about 4 years or so. I think most people know us, about 9,000 hotels across 20 different brands in generally the economy and select service space. Very excited to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Neil?
Hi, I'm Neil Patel from Austin, Texas. I'm a hotelier, and I'm also a franchisee with both Wyndham and Choice. So thank you for everything y'all do for us. And I'm also the treasurer of Asian American Hotel Owners Association. We have 20,000 members, and 1 out of every 2 hotels in the nation are owned by our members. We're an advocacy. We do events, education, everything that's hotel related. Thank you.
Okay, great. No, thank you. Brian, I think we know you're there, but we're not sure we can see you, but I know you're working on that. Are you able to hear us?
Yeah, my internet keeps going in and out, so I'll try to respond, and if not, I'll dial in via phone, but thank you for having me.
You sound great.
Brian Kirkland, I'm the CTO at Choice Hotels. I've been with Choice for about 5 years, and I'm excited to be on this group and presenting and talking with this interesting topic that's definitely pertinent for this time.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you all for joining us. And thank everyone else who stayed on and is participating in this discussion. You know, COVID-19 has unquestionably accelerated the infusion of leaner technologies and applications into the hotel environment. Technology features that may have originally been intended for, and even considered novelties or extra conveniences are really now suddenly necessities at a time when people are really almost afraid to step in to a hotel, or certainly sometimes even outside of their own doors. Let's talk a little bit about how leaner technology can help hotels operate more efficiently. Saving time, saving energy, being more sustainable, saving money, and maintaining a great guest experience. There's so many things that have really come to fruition: remote check-in, QR codes, AI automation, touchless, the whole process becoming touchless, chatbots, live chat, all of those things. So we really have a lot to talk about, and we would encourage the audience to share any questions that you have, because we want to make sure to address those as well. So let me start with the first question that we have for each of you. Obviously, there's been a number of drivers that are created to help improve the level of hotel operations and efficiency. And it's not just around the COVID, but we also have higher minimum wages as well. So we want to be more efficient. How has your organization responded to some of this? And Neil, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Diane. So COVID has brought on, our industry has to adapt. And because of COVID, a lot of times when we felt, we may not need this or we may not need that, because of COVID, we're implementing it. For example, even those chatbots, as we mentioned, for guest confidence in our industry is at an all-time low. So we have to get it back. And how do we make that happen? And it has to be things where we're interacting with guests, and we don't have to be face-to-face with them. And that's where technology comes in. a lot of times we were driven by the brands, that the brands were telling us you have to do this, you have to do that. But now the hotel owners are now taking the initiative, because we know that these are unprecedented times and we have to step up and get the guest confidence back. At the same time, we have to make sure our customer service stays the same or better than before. And that's what
Right.
we're focusing on.
Yeah, as well as safeguarding your staff, right? I mean, everyone is looking for some sense of security and protection.
Yep.
So, Scott, what are your thoughts around that?
Certainly. When we think about the customer and we think about how we're applying technology to it, we looked at it in two ways. We have two customers. We have the guest and we have the franchisee. And the perfect world is when a technology investment benefits both of them. And I think Neil, as a franchisee, would certainly agree with that. So what was our guest looking for during this time? The guest is looking for cleanliness. They're looking for safety, perhaps through contactless. They're looking for flexibility, perhaps in booking windows or cancellations. The franchisee is looking for safety as well, for their staff, for themselves, because many of our franchisees suddenly became owner-operators. In the past, they may have stepped away a little bit from their hotel, but now in this crisis, they're owner-operators again. So they're invested absolutely in the safety of their hotel. They're looking for efficiency, of course, and then they're looking for occupancy. How do we get people into the hotel so we can reach our break-even point? So we looked at that across both our guest and our franchisee and put together a project portfolio. And where we had those intersections, and it sounds silly, but where you have those intersections, those were the projects that we prioritized. And as you alluded to earlier, we pulled forward some initiatives that maybe we hadn't planned to work on until 2021 or even 2022. An example of that would be we were already heavily investing in our mobile platform, absolutely. But pulling forward contactless payments, that's something we did immediately. And we're actually excited to say in our next release of our mobile app, we'll have Google Pay, Apple Pay, swipe and go. That'll be great because it's one less interaction point for everybody that's involved there. Something else that we looked at immediately because we were hearing it from our franchisee advisory council, and Neil raises a great point here. It used to be that we were driving technology, quote unquote, the brand was driving technology. The best case is we're listening to the franchisee. Let's listen to the franchisee advisory council. Let's listen to AHOA. Let's hear what they need. And something we heard continually was our guests are coming in and they want to know when the last time somebody stayed in my room was. How long has it been since that room has been rented? Because there was a perception, real or not, but we learned it was real, that if a room had been vacant for 48 or 72 hours, it was going to be safer for everybody. So we immediately developed a set of reports for our franchisees that showed them room last rented. They could have found it in the system. It was a little bit awkward, but we put it front and center so that you could go in there and you could find when was this room last rented. Well, that makes it easier, again, on the operator, and it makes it easier for the guest. So that was one of those mini projects we could quickly roll out.
That's great. Thank you. Brian, I know, I believe you're connected, and if you want to share how your organization's responded to some of this, that'd be helpful. Just let us know you're there.
Yeah. Sure. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Awesome. I apologize. I don't know what's going on with the internet, but Murphy's Law's kicked in full steam over here. For us, I mean, obviously, we're always focused on our franchisees and want to make sure we're helping them be successful. I think some of the interesting things that we've done in recent times are around this question are, for example, we have market-based franchisee support. We call them area directors or RADs. They're revenue management teams, and they work with the franchisees. They provide best-in-class service across the country. And we're one of the few hotel companies that still provide that locally, one-on-one, visiting those hotels. But in this pandemic, we can't do that. We can't travel. And so we actually shifted a lot of the resources, a lot of the people around our company to join this team, move to a virtual world. And since the pandemic kicked off, we've had over 30,000 one-on-one consultations, but all virtual. And we're engaging with every single hotel in the system. And when we do that, we're just reaching out to understand what are their needs, what do they need help with. We're trying to just listen and see how can we help, because our focus is on making sure they're able to get back to profitability and keep their doors open. From that, we've done all kinds of things. We've even helped fill out financial aid with government applications. So there's been a lot of learning and participating and driving just
in programs and processes, things we've rolled out at the franchisee side. And then on the other side of the equation with our guests, they always wanted clean rooms, but now 70% of them, they don't even want housekeeping. There's changing mood, changing appetite for what they're interested in. And so we're redesigning housekeeping programs. We're redesigning our contactless strategies. We're offering things like contactless concierge and trying to give that no-touch experience that guests are kind of pivoting to, and make sure we're ready to help drive those operational efficiencies that the hotels need right now during this crisis.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yeah, completely understand that. It's funny because, one of the other questions that I had was really how big of a priority are the property level technology investments within your organizations? And I'm sure, for everyone really, this is really a situation and an opportunity to kind of evolve and immediately address the needs of both, the operations and the market. So I'm going to assume. I mean, are there varying degrees of priority placed on some of the investments that you're making, and if so, where are your priorities?
So, Diane, before COVID, for our hotels, technology wasn't up there on the list because we always felt that when we added a new technology, it was to enhance guest satisfaction. So what I mean by that is we're doing things more hands-on for guest satisfaction. And we felt that implementing a new technology is going to cost more, our ROI is not going to be there. But what we learned when we implemented our first one is our guest satisfaction went up automatically. And then as a hotel owner, you're always trying to save money. And going forward in the future, it definitely can't be anything right now. Last year when I traveled, I flew about 172 days out of the year. And every time I stayed, I never turned on my TV unless the TV had Netflix or something like that where I can watch my own shows. And I don't think 5 years from now, cable is needed in our hotel rooms. I think it can all be, every guest, majority of the guests already have access in Netflix or Amazon Prime or other streaming services. And I think that is the future. And that is a low-cost technology, and the ROI is going to be so much higher when you see the savings on it.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Actually, it's going the way of the telephone, right? I mean, other than the fire life safety issue, you'd be hard pressed to justify actually why someone would invest in putting a telephone in the room to begin with. So
Absolutely.
How about you, Scott?
Property level technology is our number one investment in 2021 and was our number one investment in 2020 as well. By far, it's actually consuming roughly 40% of our total capital IT budget in both of those years, which is pretty incredible when you think about a company the size of Wyndham and what we're spending there. So very, very excited. And to build on something that Neil had said about housekeeping, and housekeeping maybe not being as engaged day to day or not being even wanted by that guest. Something that we provided at the property level was a checklist. So when the housekeepers did come in, perhaps at checkout, they knew that these were the new sanitation protocols. These were the new ways they needed to clean the room, because some of these housekeepers might have been cleaning that same room for 10 years, or 5 years. And suddenly they're being asked, remember to wipe down the doorknob. Remember to use this product to wipe down the doorknob. Ooh, okay, got it. And so we put that into a digital checklist. But that's an example. Again, a very small example, but at scale, that makes a big difference for both the franchisees and the guests.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you. Brian, do you have anything you want to share on the property level technology investments?
Yeah, absolutely. The answers are spot on. I actually agree with Neil on the technology front with guests in room. I think 5G is actually going to be an interesting driver for where guests' expectations go and what that does in hotels and even with the property on property networks as much as it does with what devices hotel guests bring with them and their expectations on property. It's going to be a huge evolution for us. And so we're paying attention to those types of things. I think if you look back at the last few decades and then compare it to the future, the reality is there's a lot of evolution happening that's empowered by the cloud, and the cloud is making it possible for some some extremely advanced technologies to become mainstream. Things that weren't possible before, things that were we didn't have enough staff to go off and build machine learning and AI capabilities and virtual assistants and all these capabilities, and now we get to leverage really easily to provide experiences that our guests really passionately enjoy, and our franchisees leverage and hopefully help drive down their costs and drive up their profitability. And so we're really focused on all of those things and taking advantage of the cloud as best as we can. We've been on a journey to migrate to the cloud. We've made a lot of headway, and we're continuing that journey.
Great. Thank you. There's such a plethora of new technologies and new innovators and potential new partnerships coming in to support really the leaner, contactless, automated, digital payments and processes that we're really looking for. I have to ask, and it's in part, obviously one of the things that I get to do is I work with innovators and startups, and I'm always fascinated by, some of the things that I come across. And I'm going to ask you, what are some of the things that you're really excited about and why? But before I do that, can you share a little bit about where you look to find these new technologies and the latest and greatest and innovative stuff?
As a part of High Tech Council for the last 3 years, I think High Tech Conference is probably where I go to see the next great technology in the industry, because anything we see at that conference 5 years later, it comes to the industry and it's implemented. So it's definitely great to get an edge over your competition, and also learning. I always love to learn new technology. And as Scott mentioned earlier, 5G, I think that technology, again, saving money, 5G will save money, because I feel like we may not even need Wi-Fi going forward. Everyone has a cell phone. And if 5G is much faster than what we are currently offering, then no one's going to be using our hotel Wi-Fi, and we'll be saving huge cost. It's going to be one of our major expenses being cut out. So I think that's what I'm looking forward to. And any technology that helps us with team management on our side, because I looked at a technology where it replaces your HR manager. You input all your employees on there, and it automatically schedules them, automatically text them. And if someone cannot make it, they'll automatically replace them and text the next person in line. And I think things like that are the future of the industry. And I feel like that'll make our job as owners and managers so much easier, because now we can worry about the most important issue, which is guest satisfaction, because that's what is our number one priority, and leave the nitty-bitty to the technology.
Mm-hmm. Okay. How about you, Brian?
So
I would actually add to what Neil said. I think that's a great avenue for where to find great information. Others is outside of our hospitality space, but in the technology space, right? We're here talking a little bit about IT today. Hopefully a lot of you got to watch Scott even present recently at reInvent, AWS's major conference. I've presented at those in the past, and not only do they have hospitality sectors and presentations that happen so you can learn about what's happening in the space even beyond hotels, but you learn about the technology that's out there. There's technology that's agnostic of the industry that's providing massive learning curve advances for us. And so you look at things like data. How do we use advanced data analytics, machine learning, artificial intelligence? How do we leverage those capabilities with all the data we have to go out there and do something meaningful for our guests or for our franchisees? 5G, you learn a ton about that at those industry types of conferences as well. And so I think there's a lot of exciting avenues to get out there. And the interesting challenge comes, how do you make that real? How do you make it tangible? And how do you make a difference for your guests and your customers?
Yeah, thank
well
you.
said, Brian.
Yeah,
well
Scott,
said. Completely agree with what you're saying there in terms of looking outside of the industry. Sometimes in hospitality, we focus so much here. Look at Apple. Apple's doing an incredible job in the way they service their customer. So what can we learn from that? How do you make a touchless experience? How do you allow people to schedule, for example, appointments on their mobile device? Those are some of the things that we're cribbing as we look at how we interact with our hotels. So that's a great area. Another great area to look at is actually the luxury brands. I'm in select service, so is Brian. We do have some higher level offerings, but take a look at those luxury brands, see what they're doing. Okay, how can we bring that to our hotels at a lower cost? And to go back to something that Brian said, if we can do that via cloud technology, then right away that democratizes. That makes it cheaper for everybody and allows the franchisee to focus on serving the guest and the customer, and allows us to worry about the technology that's serving them as a backbone. So that was kind of part one of your question, I think. I think part two is, what are we excited about? I'm excited about data as well, in terms of the ability to perform mining on data so that we can drive that occupancy, so that we can create these offers for guests that are relevant. So that's part of the equation. The other part of the equation is so we can understand what's going on a little bit better at the hotel level. You know, what is going on at a single property, and how could we possibly help that hotel more? You know, if we take a look, are they getting the occupancy they need in midweek? No. Okay. Then how do we help them perhaps with our global sales organization, help drive some of that in? And running big data on that, running some algorithms on that will immediately make that apparent to us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, you're right. You know, it's interesting because really, when you think about it, our part of our industry evolution is in part because we have guests bringing in that consumer experience and expectation into the properties. I mean, we can essentially do everything through our mobile, our digital life on this mobile device. Yet we may have to still open Armoire to watch a television program that is not our first choice or our preference, or check in a way that, I mean, there's so many things that are kind of has become somewhat of a contradiction over time, but things have definitely shifted. One of the things somebody's asking, they're wanting to know from you, if you can estimate in the coming season as occupancy and as an individual business, you know, what is it that you're seeing in terms of incorporating leaner IT, but also what's your kind of projections for where we're going, and with the industry and occupancy, and if you have thoughts around that. Anyone?
Sorry, I was on mute. Recently, we were looking at a report. And the industry is not going to be stabilized until 2023. And there are pockets in the United States and which are doing better than usual, better than other spots. But then there are also hotels or hotel segments like limited service and select service, which are outperforming the luxury brands or the other full service hotels. Because, and I feel like the recovery for them is going to be so much faster. And I actually believe that industry or that segment will recover by 2022. And going back to technology, I think revenue management is very important, especially right now. And there are technologies, there are softwares out there that can automate whatever what you're trying to achieve, and will keep a track of all your competition and what they're charging. And if you want to be the lowest, or if you want to be right in the middle, so that way you can optimize on what you're getting. See, one thing I feel is if my ADR is $100 and if my profit is $5, now if I increase my ADR to 110, that extra $10 is flowing straight to the profit. So now my profit is 15 because there's not many expenses on that extra $10. So revenue management is probably the most important thing, especially in times like right now.
Yeah, thank you. You know, it's funny because one of the things that I wanted to ask is if you have certain benchmarks around the ROI in place today, and really in committing to various property level investments. So, Brian or Scott, do you have thoughts around that?
Sure, I can start there. I think this boils down to it's really hard to predict the future, right? And a lot of the KPIs, the benchmarks and measurements that were true back in 2019, we kind of threw them out the window because the KPIs don't matter anymore. They're different metrics, they're different realities that we're facing. I think I read AHLA's recent State of the Industry report, and they're predicting 2024 before things return to that level. I think for Choice, we're a little bit different in that a lot of our market is drive to market and it's leisure travel. And so those are the things that are picking up early and picking up easier. And so that's helping our franchisees. But we're really at the root of this. We're looking at, like Neil said, revenue management is a huge aspect of being able to recover and being able to make the right decision. Leveraging advanced pricing algorithms, leveraging machine learning algorithms, leveraging mobile first, and making it easy for our franchisees to kind of pivot, realizing that the old answers aren't going to be true anymore, and let's use the advanced technology we have to make better decisions and kind of accurately predict and forecast future data, looking at all that data that we have accessible now that we didn't have in the past. And so those types of things are extremely important for us when we're trying to determine what do we do, because a lot of those benchmarks, they don't matter. They matter, but they're inaccurate because the trend is so different. And so on our side, it's franchisee focus on profitability, guests focus on safety and delighting their experience when they're on property. And it's 2021, I think, is going to be very much the same as 2020. We're going to be waiting to react to the changing economy and changing environment that we're in, and hopefully it does better than the predictions are saying. I liked Neil's answer. 2022 would be a nice thing.
Yeah, and hopefully a lot of our hoteliers and owners can withstand the duration during this period. But Scott, do you want to share some thoughts?
Sure. When we look at ROI, very similar to the way that both Brian and Neil were articulating it, there's also an aspect of cost reduction, cost avoidance, maybe a regulatory requirement, or something we just call table stakes. Table stakes based on guest requirements, table stakes based on the fact that the technology has become so consumer focused now. If they walk into a hotel and they don't have the ability, for example, to perform some sort of self-serve, then you're going to receive a bad review. So you need to ensure that you are looking at your ROI across all of those dimensions. In this crisis right now, then of course cost reduction and cost avoidance rose to the top. And then expectations from our guests in terms of ability to be contactless quickly were elevated as well. So we invested massively in our mobile platform to allow people to perform mobile check-in and check-out, and then to build on the revenue management aspect that both my fellow panelists referenced as well. We're going to offer something called Choose Your Room. So as things start to come back up, people, yes, we're in drive-to markets, but if somebody's interested in that corner room on the second floor, let them choose it and then charge them $5 more for that. And as Neil said, that $5 is critical. That $5 is pure profit. And it's going through a direct channel for us. It's going through a direct channel for our franchisee. What a great offer here. And people have saved up. They're willing to travel. And for one of, a family coming in and being able to choose their specific room, oh, sure, we've been locked in our house for 10 months. I'll pay $5 extra for that corner room. Why not? So we're very excited about things like that will drive revenue and have a real impact for our franchisees.
Great, thank you. Yeah, it's interesting that that's an example of where you would think, why can't we do that today? I mean, why haven't we been able to do that, since we can do it on a plane and we can do it in so many other places? And recognizing, obviously, a hotel is a little bit different in a lot of ways. But yeah, there's so many other additional things that are really being brought in. Let me ask you, what do you see as being probably the most effective IT investment so far that's really kind of brought you all to a leaner, more efficient process? Is there one particular thing that you might be able to identify as kind of being the, and maybe it's been a surprise, but the one leading investment and shift that you've made that's really shown the greatest result?
So Diane, before I answer that, I want to go back to your comment about choosing the room. I think that's perfect. And one thing we need to recognize is when airline industry does something, it's hard for the hotel industry to implement the same because airline industry owns their own assets. For hotel industry, it's relying upon the franchisees. And sometimes when you introduce a new technology, by the time your last hotel comes on board, that technology may already be obsolete.
Yeah.
And your question about what's the best technology we've invested in, let me tell you what the worst one that we invested in first. And those were the iPod clock radios. We spent $150 for each one of those. And within 3 years, they were obsolete. You can't plug in your phone in it anymore. And things like that we have to be careful about. But when you talk about the best technology, you can never go wrong with Wi-Fi. Upgrading your system, making sure you have the highest speeds possible, make sure you have access points all over the hotel, and that technology would cost a typical hotel $20 or $30,000, but the ROI, you'll see it in your customer service reviews, your guest satisfaction scores, and recently I read somewhere that if you increase your TripAdvisor rating by 1 star, that's a $15 extra bump on your ADR. And that's a huge ROI that's there. So I think anytime when we can evaluate on what the ROI is going to be, you can't really look at it on paper, but also look at, if I implement this, how is it going to make my guest feel? And are they willing to pay me extra? And most of the times the answer is yes.
Mm-hmm. Those are good points. Thank you. Scott?
From our perspective, one of the best investments we're finding right now is our investment in the mobile platform, because this again is that intersection of franchisee and guest. For the guest, it allows them, to look and book and to convert higher. Absolutely. It also allows them to learn more about our hotels and to perform self-check-in. Great. That's going to make the front desk more efficient. So that gives efficiency, to the front desk agent. It allows them to check out. Great. Allows them to do that contactless payment. And then for hotels that are interested, if they want to implement a higher level sort of customer service with texting and concierge type services, we can offer that too. But the beautiful part is all that investment is made on the mobile platform in the cloud. It's not something that has to change at the hotel level. So you avoid what Neil was talking about, rolling out the clock radios that in turn become obsolete. We get to roll that out into the cloud. We get to roll that out into standardized platforms that are then available for the consumers and the franchisee globally.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. And obviously, cloud migration is probably top of mind and a priority in a very general sense. Brian, do you have some thoughts you want to share around it?
Sure. I think Scott nailed it with the mobile aspect, and you alluded to the cloud migration. I think for Choice, we've been on this cloud journey for a while. We've moved our CMS to the cloud, purpose-built for the cloud, first in 30 years to do that. We have our PMS in the cloud. Our data analytics platform is now in the cloud. Our revenue management system, we just rolled out the new version. The cloud is really enabling us to accelerate and pivot quickly, which during the pandemic, right, we more options in the pandemic than we did all of last year. And so we're seeing a massive benefit from the investment we made in prior years on being in the cloud to be able to move quickly for promos, fraud reaction, all kinds of things. And so I think the cloud piece is nailed it.
Yeah.
Real quick, to add to Brian and Scott's comment about our phone and technology on there. In order to get in my phone, I feel like it's so much harder than my bank account. Like what I mean by that is I feel like my iPhone face recognition is more secure than my bank account information, and I feel that is the future. And as we've been discussing, online check-in and let the phone scan your ID, let the phone do face recognition. And if you're a rewards member, then guess what? All the information is already there. And I feel like it will make the industry be so much better going forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's. I just had a thought, and I just it just skipped my mind. But talking about cloud.
There's one comment in the chat.
Oh,
well, there's one comment in the chat from someone that asked about training and education. I think that's a huge thing that that's definitely happened with regards to being virtual. Not only are our staff and our employees virtual doing their work to maintain the systems, but we have to figure out new and inventive ways to roll out those things like training and get the new staff that's coming on board at these hotels as they reopen trained up. And so for Choice, I don't know about everybody else. For us, we definitely put a huge investment in our Choice University and made some massive strides with what we're able to roll out and pivoted extensively to that platform. It's working very well for us. So the person in chat nailed that one.
Yeah.
Yep.
Anyone else?
Great observation there, Brian. Yeah, when we talk about Wyndham University as well, we pivoted over to a Zoom education platform. And as we roll out the new PMSs now in this new environment, we're actually performing the majority of that education in sessions via Zoom that we've established. There's also little equivalent of YouTube videos that people can click on, and they can watch it for 5 or 10 minutes. What we found is that's the way that the new generation wants to learn anyway. Give me a video, a how-to video for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Show me how to check somebody in. Show me how to swipe a credit card. Great, that's good enough for now. If I have a question later on maybe I need to split credit cards, I'll come back and I'll pop a different video. So we've redeveloped the way that we're onboarding and converting some of these hotels in comparison to the past, where we would just send somebody out in a car, live with them for a couple of days, train their front desk staff, and leave.
And then for AHOA, we've had a huge investment when it comes to education and technology. This year alone, we've hosted over 200 webinars, and out of those, 180 of them are COVID related. So we're trying to make sure that the members have everything they need to educate themselves about this pandemic, because we're also learning new information every day. And we want to make sure that the owners and members and our team knows exactly what's going on or what the best practices are.
Okay, great. We've got about 2 minutes to wrap up, and I want to take an opportunity real quick, just if I can, to find out, just get a sense from the three of you, do you have any technology predictions for what the next big thing is going to be? And I think I have an idea of what it might be that you're going to say. So, what do you think?
We've talked about a few, right? We talked about 5G is definitely going to have a place in driving mobile for our guests and what we do on property. I think that's a huge piece, but I think Scott talked about it as well with data. What we can do with data and how we can leverage that data, leveraging the power of the cloud to do advanced interrogation and figure out the best answer quickly is going to help us deal with the fact that the KPIs have all changed, the industry's changed, the models have changed, and expectations have changed. So I think leveraging data is going to be a huge asset going forward, and who can do that best.
My only add to that would be on the quote-unquote AI or machine learning side. I think we're going to see chatbots reach a whole new level here pretty soon. They'll build on the data that's out there, but with the ubiquity of the cloud and the additional processing they have, I think we're going to find more and more transactions that we're going to be comfortable putting onto chatbots. Again, even for check-in beyond the mobile check-in, questions that guests may have, questions that franchisees may have, we may be able to enable a level of self-serve or auto-serve that we haven't before.
Neil?
Yeah, for me, as Brian had stated, 5G is definitely one of them. And I also feel facial recognition, especially when it comes to virtual check-in. And I feel that will be huge for the industry. With the wages going higher and higher as we speak, I believe that technology will be cheaper than paying someone or having 2 people or 3 people on our team at greeting the guest and checking them in. I believe going forward, we'll be able to save on our payroll cost. And anytime we can save money, you'll see me smile.
Well, listen, thank you. Thank you, the panelists, and thank you, the audience, for joining us today. We're really grateful to have had this opportunity to share this time and to share some thoughts around leaner IT operations and processes at this time. So thank you. I think we're going to take a break.
Great information. Thanks, panelists, for sharing. Next, we have another 5-minute break. Our third panel of Hotel Optimization Part 3 is Insurance, Lawsuits, and Risk Management. Moderated by Elaine Simon, Senior Managing Editor of Hotel Management, and sponsored by Bureau Veritas. Please add your questions for the panelists to the Q&A tab on the left, as well as look at the Handouts tab. Here are a few words from our sponsor.
Bureau Veritas is a world leader in testing, inspection, and certification. Bureau Veritas supports businesses by introducing our Safeguard Hygiene Excellence and Safety label that make them verified, accountable, and trusted by consumers. First, we work with you to establish guidelines and protocols for your business. Then we prepare a toolkit to communicate new protocols to your stakeholders. Next, we conduct an initial audit to ensure full compliance of hygiene protocols, so we can administer our Safeguard Hygiene Excellence and Safety label. Audit results are gathered in an executive dashboard. By using a trusted third party to certify hygiene protocols and compliance, you provide assurance to your customers and employees. And by showing you've taken reasonable precautions, you also mitigate legal liabilities. With unrivaled experience of certification processes in more than 140 countries, we are helping verified brands get back to business. Through global digital initiatives such as this, Bureau Veritas is shaping a world of trust.
Thanks, Amy, and welcome. The three panelists joining me today come to our next topic from very different directions, which should help us provide a very well-rounded approach to our discussion. I'm going to let them introduce themselves, starting with Jackie. Tell us, a little bit about you.
I'm Jackie Collins. I'm with Arthur J. Gallagher. In this industry for about 30 years. With Gallagher for 17 and specialize in the hospitality industry. I'm located in Houston.
Jackie, you might try turning your volume up a little or moving a little closer. It's kind of hard to hear you.
Okay. All right. Is that better?
Much better. Thank you. All right. Now tell us again who missed that.
Okay. I'm Jackie Collins. I'm with Arthur J. Gallagher. Have been in the insurance industry for about 30 years. Have worked with Gallagher for about 17 of those years, specializing in the hospitality industry.
All right, great. All right, Mike?
Yeah, Mike Marshall. I've owned Marshall Hotels and Resorts. We're a third-party management company. We currently manage about 70 hotels from Florida to Vermont out to Texas.
All right, great. Thanks for joining us. Sherry?
Hi, I'm Sherry Orrell. I am the president of Bureau Veritas North America Certification, Assurance, and Inspection Division, and I'm looking forward to speaking to you all today.
Great. So hotels are trying to save money any way they can, as well as keep guests and employees safe. So on this panel today, we're going to take a look at some behind the scenes and some not so behind the scenes ways they can do that in terms of insurance, lawsuits, and risk management. So we're going to start with insurance, and this one is for Jackie to start with. There's been a lot of confusion and disagreement in the industry about whether traditional insurance policies cover COVID-19 and the situation hotels find themselves in now. So kind of what is the insurance situation that hotels are dealing with now, and specifically in regards to COVID-19?
So this is a tough question. So you'll bear with me.
We can't hear you at all for some reason.
No. Okay.
Yeah.
Now?
Let's try that. That's better.
Okay, is that better?
Yes.
Better?
So far.
Okay. So far. Okay. So this is going to be a little lengthy, and it still remains a tough question to answer because there's so many unknowns, and there's a different case. It's case by case, and policy language varies. So there are some coverages, though, that you need to take a look at, and that's workers' comp, general liability, D&O, your directors and officers coverage, all of your management liability policies, property, business interruption, travel accident, and pollution. And like I said, it's going to vary on a case-by-case basis and depending on the language and your actual policy. But there's three that I'd like to touch on quickly if we can. So your general liability policy, it responds to property damage and bodily injury to third parties, which would be your guests. From a liability standpoint, involving the coronavirus or a similar health emergency, will arise chiefly out of a failure to protect your guests for which you're legally liable. So, not cleaning the property like you should. Typical exclusions to watch for in your policy, though, are going to be pollution exclusions as well as communicable disease exclusions. We're seeing lots of carriers put those on, the communicable disease exclusions on now. Pollution policies, though, or coverage enhancements, they may reveal some opportunities for payment of cleanup costs for contamination by the virus. The next thing I'd like to touch on briefly is workers' comp. And in order for an employee illness to be compensable, the disease would have to be contracted during the course of employment and due to conditions specific to the employee's work. So occupations in healthcare, treating infected corona patients, or first responders who transport sick individuals to hospitals or healthcare sites. Otherwise, a communicable disease that affects the public will not usually be considered a workers' compensation claim. But at the end of the day, each state is looking at this and making, their own decisions on how they're going to treat coronavirus illness in the workplace. And then the big question is, from a property standpoint, do I have coverage for business income? And, London just came out with, it's going to be required that the underwriters pay any loss of business income due to the shutdown that they've recently had. How that's going to affect the U.S., if it will, that's left to be seen. But what we're running to from a property standpoint is that you must have physical loss or damage at the insured property in order for coverage to be triggered. So contamination of property at an insured location may constitute physical loss or damage, but then you still run into exclusions for pathogenic organisms, viruses, disease, etc. So most traditional policies, they're going to exclude contamination altogether. So, it's still going to have to be seen in the courts. Every state is handling it differently. We're seeing different outcomes by state. So in order for it's still so many unknowns out there, but you really need to go back to the policy language and see how yours reads.
Mm-hmm. So read, no matter how many pages it is, you need to read that policy.
Yeah, or work with your broker.
Okay. Now, we're talking about the workers' comp and the bodily injury. When that virus is all around, how do you prove exactly where you might have gotten sick from or, had some kind of adverse outcome?
Yeah, I don't think that that's probably something that I can answer. I think you'd probably have to work with, others on, identifying that and making that determination.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So Jackie mentioned about every state is doing things differently and the rules are different. So Mike, you have properties in various states across the country. What are you finding with insurance? What's the situation?
I mean, there's no precedence yet. There's nothing that's gone anywhere. Like Jackie said, they went through the court system in the United Kingdom where they are now requiring the insurance companies. I'll try to turn my speaker down a bit. So you've got government mandates in the UK. There's been nothing to go through the United States as of yet. Certainly, there have been some states that have tried to introduce legislation, but we haven't seen anything yet that's been detrimental to the industry as of yet.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Sherry, Bureau Veritas is working with a number of hotels in terms of testing, inspection, certification. What is involved in that, and what does that mean for hotels?
Yes. So Phoebe created, there's a lot of kickback on this call. My speakers are off, so I'm not sure what's happening. I can keep going, but I don't even know if anybody can hear.
We can hear you, but we can hear the static too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Speakers are down. Speakers are muted, tech team. So we have a 6-step process. The first is really to develop the hygiene protocols at the individual hotel level. And there will be a lot of similarities. We've done 5,000 specific safeguard protocols since COVID started in May, but each location probably has a little bit of customization involved. We make sure that we get everyone involved, all the stakeholders, and then very critically, we need to train across the board. Anyone that's going to touch a guest experience, anyone that's going to be involved at all in the health and hygiene process has to be thoroughly trained. We've created e-learning modules that make this very easy. Then the third step is to ensure compliance. We have thousands globally of auditors that are placed in regions where they can go in, take the customized protocols that we've developed on behalf of your location, and physically or virtually go in and conduct that audit to make sure that you're compliant, identify any gaps that might be currently happening in your system from a consistency perspective, and work with you to close those. So that the fourth step is to be able to issue our safeguard label. And this is the assurance for your guests that your hotel is embracing the highest standards of hygiene protocol that are being recommended globally and regionally. And it is a physical, actual sticker in some instances that you can put on your front door and in high traffic areas that let your guests know that you've gone above and beyond and embraced this process. It also has a QR code that can take that guest to a website that further explains the rigorous methods that your hotel is using to ensure their safety and the safety of your staff. And then the next step is really to market this, and we can work with you to do this, but to create an awareness so that your guests and your customers understand that this is a process that you've embraced above and beyond what we normally expected within your region. And then the last thing that we recommend is really creating a continuity plan of both high, medium, and low touch engagement that could happen on a weekly, monthly, or quarterly basis, because there is that fatigue factor a bit that comes into play, and turnover within hospitality can be quite high. So we need to ensure that new people that come into the team understand the process, and that we can continuously monitor to make sure that you're continuing to embrace these high standards.
Mm-hmm. Now, the hotels that have worked with you on this, is the demand coming more from them, or are their guests telling them, we want something like this, to be part of our hotel experience?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. I think some hotels are doing some general self-assessment. We at BV did a pretty extensive consumer survey in the summer last year in July, based in the U.S. And I know we have a global audience, but I would imagine that the sentiments are not dramatically different. And we ran that same consumer study in January. We wanted to see if the consumer and the guest sentiment had changed in a post-vaccine world when we began to see that deployed. And surprisingly, I think to us, the sentiment changed almost zero between last July and current in terms of what they expect. So, we use this data to share with our customers as they make these decisions. But we asked them a couple of key questions, and the first one was, how long do you expect COVID to be a concern in your life, right? And what they said in July was exactly what they said in January. And over 60% said they expect this to be a significant factor for more than a year, with almost a quarter of them saying they expect it to be more than 2 years. And only about 15% of the total survey said that they thought this was going to be a non-issue within the next 6 months. But I think the telling question was not just about COVID, because we live in a world where a pandemic is a real thing now and doesn't just exist in Hollywood. And so we asked what they anticipated their concerns about viruses in general, because this would really speak to the long-term reality of embracing a higher standard and communicating that embracing of higher standards to our guests. And So we asked them how long they expected other viruses to be a factor in their life, and nearly 70% said more than a year, but the highest percentage, over a third, said more than 10 years. And so that was pretty telling. And we did ask some specific questions to hospitality. There are a lot of other questions, and this was an exhaustive research study. I'm happy to share some of the details with those that are interested. But we asked them about temporary and permanent changes they intend to make in their lives because of their concerns about viruses. And almost half said that they plan in the short term, on a temporary basis, to eliminate leisure travel. A quarter said they plan to eliminate business travel, and over 40% said they plan to eliminate dining in restaurants, which is also relevant to hospitality. And from a permanent change perspective, nearly 20% said they plan to eliminate all leisure travel, 12% business travel, and almost 20% say they see a very long-term approach to eliminating restaurant visits. So this, I think, gives us a great opportunity to take a leadership role. I think a lot of us had hoped that various governments around the world would take a lead in creating new standards that would help us all feel comfortable when the time is right, re-engaging in society. And I think it's the business leaders on this call and otherwise that will really set the stage and help communicate safety to our guests and to the general public.
Okay. And Jackie, you had a comment on this?
Yes, my comment was, the insurance companies are focusing on what hotel companies are doing and the protocols that they are taking. And it's not so much from a pricing standpoint, but more importantly, they're looking at whether or not they even want to write your business. So it's super important to share with the carriers what you're doing and not just saying, hey, yeah, we're following brand standards. They want to know exactly what you're doing at each of your properties, and that'll make a big, difference in whether the carriers have interest or not.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So Mike, from a hotel perspective, what are you bringing to the table when you go to your insurers and, either want a new policy or a better policy or something like that? What are you proving to them that you're doing to make this all better for your hotels?
I mean, first of all, finding an insurer to write hospitality right now is very difficult. I know we went through a renewal in November, and we went through, and we have a master policy with a lot of hotels on it. We went through 25 carriers, and only 2 or 3 of them were even willing to give us a quote. So we felt very lucky to get an insurance program in place and it was, it's not an insignificant cost increase, but about a 24% increase. Where we heard, from a lot of other people, they were looking at 40, 50, 60% increases. So the insurance industry has really folded up on the hospitality industry right now. And it's because of the things we're talking about. They're scared. They don't know what's going to happen. They don't know if the government's going to say, hey, you've got to pay out on this, that, and the other thing. So there's just a lot of uncertainty out there. But we did have to, when we were going through the renewal process, we did have to show the policies and procedures that we had in place at each and every hotel as far as cleaning and as far as taking care of our employees. So we didn't know about B&B at the time. We certainly would talk to you guys. I was interested in seeing what the cost for that is. But, we basically took all the best practices at the AHLNA, Hilton, Marriott, and looked at what was best for our properties and took the best practices and put them together, put them in writing, and we did share that with the insurance companies, as Jackie mentioned.
Mm-hmm. So when you went through this process, then what were you looking for from the insurance companies? Was there anything different or anything in particular that just had to be in there?
Because of our size, we've been able to evolve our master program over the years as different things have changed. But there are certain things that we would like to have gotten. We didn't get. We didn't. I mean, they're not. They still are not going to underwrite a pandemic situation. the government forced terrorism coverage back after 9/11. You know, that was the last time, and Jack, you can probably correct me if I'm wrong, where the government actually came in and said, hey, you've got to have this coverage based on these events. But we're not there at this point in time. And again, I felt lucky to get any coverage that wasn't through the roof on cost.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Sherry, you had a comment?
Yeah, so I think to your point, Mike, a lot of hotels gathered the best laid plans. We've worked with a lot of the largest mall companies and operators as well. Everyone created their new protocols. They documented them. They put them in writing. They sent them out there to their team. They often did training protocol. But I think the one thing that I've heard from some of our clients, and I can't speak to the insurance or the legal side of it, but they've been able to leverage the concept of a true third-party oversight, a third-party audit to come in and really evaluate whether you're walking the walk and talking the talk. And in general, globally, about 70% of our audits come back with some level of nonconformancy identified at the local level. And typically they're not major, but they're just enough for us to be able to go back and close some of these gaps and really work to shore up some of the training, and for management to reiterate the importance of every step of the way conforming to the processes that have been deployed, so that there is that extra level of being able to go to in some instances, some of our partners have been able to go to a local government and say all locations in such category might not be treated equally, because some of us are really taking it the extra mile and don't actually getting a third party to verify that we're doing it. So that's something to consider, to leverage as well. And from a cost perspective, it's not prohibitive. So this is definitely something that we're seeing some of our clients be able to leverage.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Jackie, what's your viewpoint? What should, in this case, what should hotels be looking for?
Yeah, so, I mean, it does go a little further than just COVID, and I'm sure that Mike might have ran into this, but, hotel companies, they're scared right now, and they are taking a conservative approach on renewals, and they are, looking for increases. But some of the other things that we need to be aware of is, with COVID, there's a number of hotels that are being repurposed. And, that's one of the things that the carriers are afraid of, that we're going from being a hotel company to, a homeless shelter or a medical facility, et cetera. So we need to be cognizant of that. And then they're also, worried about sex trafficking and, what procedures are in place. It's the same thing, just like on COVID. What exactly are you doing at your hotel to avoid sex trafficking? And then Legionella continues to be a concern for hotel companies and the insurance company. So it's just very important that you pay close attention to your renewals and what coverages they're providing and what exclusions they're adding.
Mm-hmm.
One other thing on the certification.
I think that's great advice.
Yeah. One other thing on certification is I go back to, like Hilton has their Clean State program where they put a sticker on the door. Of course, it's delaminated the door and pull the paint off the frame. But if you go back in the history of our industry, we used to put a little paper band on the toilet seat to prove that it was clean, to show the guests that you had a clean toilet. But what we found is that the housekeepers would just stick the band on the toilet without cleaning it. So so having outside certification, I think, would actually make a lot more sense than sticking a sticker on the door saying that you had complied with the Hilton Stay Clean program. There's just a lot of corners are cut at times like this because you're not generating any money, and you're afraid you're going to lose your hotel because you can't pay your mortgage. So I'm just throwing that out there.
Yeah, and Mike, there's there's something to keep in mind that there's a lot of entrepreneurs out there that have found ways to make money during this unprecedented time. And there are a number of stamps of approval that various business across categories can receive. They're not all the same process, right? So, you know, we're a company that's been around for 200 years and is known as the leader in certification. And so we apply the same process for this non-accredited certification that we do for our very regulated accreditation schemes. So, you know, that's something to keep in mind, you know, whether or not the credibility of a proven leader in this space is valuable and worth it, right? Because there are other industries that I just want a sticker, right? And, you know, my customer doesn't care where the sticker came from. It's the strip on the toilet. So really understanding what the value is in making the effort, I think, is something that needs to be weighed into the decision as well.
Exactly.
Okay. Now, looking at lawsuits, the U.S. in particular is kind of known as a litigious group of people. You know, Mike, have you found that to be the case during the past year with COVID-19? Have you faced anything, or, you know, what are you looking at with lawsuits?
I haven't faced any COVID-related lawsuits, but I've certainly faced a lot of other ones. I mean, I'm fighting ADA website lawsuits right now. That, you know, it seems to me that there are a lot of attorneys out there whose businesses may have fallen off because of COVID, so they're finding some other creative ways to sue people. But I haven't had any COVID-related lawsuits.
Okay. So with the ADA ones and other ones, is there anything you can do to, you know, prevent things before they get to that point, or is it just people go straight to the lawsuit?
Oh, they go straight to, they file a law. This latest one, a guy in New York filed a lawsuit in federal court in New York right before Christmas. I didn't get served until January 7th, and I had to respond by yesterday. I mean, so it's like they're just trying to slide things in. And we found out they'd done 33 of them at the same time. They just changed the name of the hotel.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Jackie, are you seeing anything with this, with any insurance-related lawsuits, things like that regarding hotels?
From a COVID standpoint?
A COVID for sure, but has there been an increase in other types as well?
I don't know if I mean, we see, you know, we have seen lawsuits. I don't know if I could say there's an increase. We are, you know, we see the same claims as Mike, where you got the guy that never visits the property and sends out 800 ADA lawsuits, and, you know, he's really looking at, you know, getting a few $1,000s paid in attorney fees. And so by the time you do that times 800 hotels, you made a pretty good paycheck for the day. But I think that the COVID lawsuits will come in, but I'm not sure at what pace.
Mm-hmm. Hopefully a very small or very slow pace for the sake of the industry. That's not something we want to see happen.
Hopefully the states will put some protections in place for the business owners, and that'll change that dynamic up.
Mm-hmm. Definitely something to keep a watch on. Mm-hmm. So when we're talking about mitigating risk, that kind of is the thread through all of this. Sherry, how does your safeguard solution help hotels, you know, mitigate risk? You know, you mentioned that there's communication and that there is, you know, inspections and things, but what exactly does it do to provide assurance to hotels and guests that this is a safe place to be?
Right. So, you know, risk is a tricky word. So, you know, first and foremost, in general, if practices are being followed consistently day in and day out, that alone will mitigate a lot of the risk. And if we can make sure that, and we are enforcing that, we can be the, the feet on the street. We've instituted some mystery shopping protocol, and we actually executed one of our first mystery shopping campaigns for a hotel, one of the preferred hotels in Boston, who's already been through our safeguard protocol. They've been through it 6 months ago, and they're poised to get their second round of official in-person physical auditing, but they wanted to see how they were doing 6 months later. And so that was an effort that they took upon themselves to make sure that they're policing themselves. So embracing the protocols is the first step, and making sure that's happening. But risk is also something, we can expand that, because from a brand value perspective, we live in a social shaming, canceled digital environment. And there was a pretty interesting article, and there's been many, but one in the fall from USA Today that talked about the impact on some major brands, major hotel brands, from just general guests that were social shaming for lack of embracing of protocols. And that is damaging to your brand. And so being able to publicly address these things quickly. We all know anybody who's managed people, and we've got, 70,000 people within BV. You can't control every action of every human being at every moment, but you can make sure that you've empowered them with the right information, repeatedly reiterate the expectations, have there be consequences for not embracing it, and occasionally when someone messes up, own it. There have been a couple of hotels that have taken the complete denial approach, and then others that say we take these things very seriously. And I think that's what the public generally wants to hear. They want to be heard, and they want to know that they're prioritized. And you need to manage that, of course, appropriately. But your social and your digital agencies should be engaged in this and listening for some of these situations. And if there's an opportunity to step in at a particular location or within a particular environment, if it's a health club or if it's a spa or a restaurant, step up quickly. And I think that goes a long way to protecting brand value and brand integrity.
Mm-hmm. So what about tips for hotels to manage their risk? There are small things, big things, a million things you can do. What do you think is the most important thing to, items to check off every day, Mike?
Well, first of all, have everything in writing and make sure you have someone on staff that is following through with everything that you have in writing. If you don't have policies and procedures in place that you can fall back on if you do get a lawsuit, and that, that's one of the first things that they look for in discovery, is to make sure, whether or not you've got the policies and procedures in place. If you don't have them in place, you're sunk. So first and foremost, get in writing, you have it in your emergency manual, make sure that everyone on property is aware of it, and that someone is indeed following through with those procedures.
Mm-hmm. All right, Jackie, what tips do you offer for hotels to manage risk?
Yeah, so I think it's very important that when you're selecting your insurance broker, that they have a team that can provide you loss control resources that are specific to the hotel industry, that can help you with all of your training protocols and, including COVID and ADA, et cetera. But it's also important to have an insurance company that will work alongside you and your broker as your partner, that can also provide you with those risk management and those loss prevention techniques. And that's something that should be included in your program and not an additional charge. Your carrier and your broker should be able to help you with those things.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, so many things have changed. So many things about how you run your hotel, how you deal with guests, cleaning. There's so many changes. How do you, Mike, how does training come into this, and how do you prevent fatigue? There's so much all the time. And, I've read a lot of stories about, pandemic fatigue and things like that. After a while, your brain kind of shuts off to the danger and to what's going on. So how do you train people for it and then prevent the fatigue from coming into play?
A lot of it is training the trainer more than anything, and then trying to keep it lighthearted as much as possible, try to keep it fun. But you're right about the fatigue. During the worst parts of the shutdowns, we had such a skeleton staff that was, working nonstop that, there's a tremendous amount of fatigue. And what we try to do as a company is we would send in some, just try to give people some time off, send in some task force people to try to lessen the load so you could get not so much of a physical break as much as a mental break. So from a management standpoint, it's really trying to figure out who's going to fall off the cliff and try to throw them a rope before that happens.
Mm-hmm. I would think that fatigue would be an issue even on higher levels above property. I mean, you just have so much to deal with it, and so much that, there's just only so much that everyone can take.
Well, vodka helps.
Vodka does help. I agree. I agree.
I think,
Sherry, what about?
Yeah, so I think that fatigue is real. I mean, there are a lot of businesses that are understaffed and people are being asked to do more, and that's one thing, right? So assuring your staff that this isn't permanent in terms of the workload and the expectations of more work with fewer people. And as soon as the industry rebounds, here's our plan. But I think that whenever there's this perceived light at the end of the tunnel with anything, and the tunnel keeps getting farther and farther away, psychologically, there's the fatigue. So as it comes to our new normal, the elevated standards for cleanliness, safety is the new luxury, right? I think we need to culturally shift the language so that there isn't this expectation that as soon as the vaccine is widespread, as soon as herd immunity hits a certain level, then we can let the foot off the gas. I think if we spin this into a positive, elevated service that we're perpetually going to be providing to our guests, that they're going to expect over the long haul, sort of eliminates that expectation of this is a concerted extra effort that I'm having to do temporarily and I can't wait till I can go back to the way that it was. I think very positively we can spin that this new normal is probably a good thing, right? There's probably benefits to this, and the trust that we can gain from our guests by understanding that we've elevated everything and upped our game for you. Could be, a positive spin both for the staff. We've elevated this for the staff, right? Because the staff are just as concerned about the virus as our guests are. And so I think that helps with retention. I think that helps with, enjoyment of the job. And I think if you could recognize and create milestones, that reward people for elevated levels of service and attention to detail, there are things that we can do. Someone asked a question about protocols for soft surfaces, things like that. We can include things like swab testing. If there's a concern that soft surfaces that aren't cleaned on a regular basis, like shower curtains and drapes and things, could be a contaminant, let's rule that out. Let's swab test that. Let's confirm that it's actually not a contaminant, and then we move on. And if there's a concern, we can address it then.
Mm-hmm. So our new normal is just going to be normal. This is life now in a lot of ways.
Not all, but let's put a light on what's right and spin to a positive element, things that we're going to continue to prioritize as a benefit to our guests and to our staff in a very positive way. Not, let's just get through this, let's tough it out. We don't want this to be grit. We want this to be a new elevated guest experience.
Mm-hmm. Okay. We have time for one last question, and kind of end on an optimistic note. Do you have any encouraging words in terms of insurance, lawsuits, risk management, where we're headed? I know right now is kind of a definitely a tough environment, but there's got to be some goodness coming in the future, hopefully. Anyone want to comment on that?
I will say, from an insurance standpoint, I will say the good news is insurance is cyclical, and it is a relationship business. Gallagher's been in business placing insurance for accounts for 90 years and will continue to do so. So we're just going to get through the tough times and things will turn around.
Mm-hmm. Good. Mike, you kind of smiled. Do you have any optimistic words?
My company's been around for 40 years now. This is my fourth personal industry downturn, we always come back. Sometimes it takes 4 or 5 years, but we always come back. And insurance will be the same thing. I remember there were times when we couldn't get insurance to save our life, and we paid double or triple for it. So, like Jackie said, it's cyclical. Everything comes back. There'll be a time when the insurance agencies are or the underwriters are gonna be falling over themselves to try to write new policies again. So we just got to wait it out.
This too shall pass.
Yes.
Great. Wonderful. Well, we have a break coming up in a minute, and there's also a poll. So attendees, if you would be interested in answering the poll, we would appreciate that. Thank you, panelists. I think you had a lot of great information for our attendees, and thank you, attendees. That's it for this one.
Thanks, panelists, for sharing your insights on this very timely topic. Next up is one more quick 5-minute break, and then our final panel of the day. Our last topic of the day is where the opportunities are, led by moderator CJ Arletta, managing member of CJ Media Solutions. Welcome, panelists.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate you joining us today. I'm CJ Arletta, managing member of CJ Media Solutions. In a minute, I'm going to ask the panelists to introduce themselves. But first, I want to remind you to ask questions during the discussion if you have any. I'll do my best to work them into the conversation. So let's go and introduce each one of the panelists. Eric, we'll start with you.
Thanks, CJ. Hi, everyone. My name is Eric Guerrero, and I'm Managing Director and Head of the Brokerage and Advisory Division at HVS. Our division focuses on investment sales and debt placement for owners across the country, and HVS is a consultant across the globe, and we can help owners throughout the life cycle of their hotels.
All right, thank you, Eric. Daniel?
Thank you, CJ. Good afternoon, good morning from New York City. Dan Lesser, President, CEO of LW Hospitality Advisors. We're a hotel-centric services firm. We have several silos of business. The first one is evaluation, which encompasses appraisal, consulting, market study, feasibility work, litigation-related work. The second one is asset management, which also includes receivership work. And then finally, a predictive analytics platform, lodging analytics, research, and consulting, LARC. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. Appreciate it. Duncan?
My name's Duncan Miller. I'm the head of the commercial real estate group for Morris, Manning & Martin. We have our most significant offices. The mothership is in Atlanta, Georgia, and we have a significant office in Washington, D.C. We are the largest commercial real estate practice in the Southeast, and we have a significant amount of our practice is hospitality. We see a lot of deals. And I assume that is why I'm on this panel. Just from deal flow perspective, we kind of have our finger on the pulse as to what deals are or not happening, just based on kind of the breadth of our clients in the market.
Thanks, Duncan. Appreciate it. And Alan.
Thanks, CJ. My name is Alan Tantliff. I'm Senior Managing Director of FTI Consulting. I like to describe us as the biggest company nobody's ever heard of. We have a very big practice in, we have about 5,000 people around the world who are publicly traded. Very big practice in restructurings and bankruptcy work. And obviously we'll talk a little bit about that. Happy to be here today. Thank you.
Thank you, panelists. Appreciate it. So nearly a year ago, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, transaction activity shut down almost completely, right? How would you describe the transactions market today? And what's your overall assessment of it? Dan, why don't we start with you?
Well, thank you. Actually, just to clarify what you said a minute ago, and a little bit of a backdrop, 2019 was a record year. I think we heard that on some prior panels. Including in the transaction world, not just from an operational perspective. January and February, Q1 actually started off pretty strong as well. Records set again on the operational side, and no shortage of transactions in Q1. Everything really fell off the cliff. Call it post March 15th, right? So, looking at Q2 of 2020. There were 6 trades, $10 million or more. These are single asset trades. They're not assets that are part of a portfolio where there's an allocated number. These are pure individual market trades. There were 6 in Q2 2020. There were 35 in Q2 2019. That's an 83% decrease. Total transaction volume Q2 of this year, 246 million. Compared to the same period last year, 2.6 billion. That's negative 91%. The average sale price per key in Q2, 169,000 compared to 286 the year prior. That's a 41% decrease. Now, moving on to Q3 for a second, it's interesting in 12 trades. So, everything's relative in life, right? Compared to the 6 trades in Q1, that looks good, right? But compared to Q3 of 2019, there were 40 trades. So that was a 70% decline year over year. Total transaction volume, 829 million compared to the year prior, 3.7 billion, close to an 80% decrease. And then when we look at Q4 of 2020, there were 32 trades, right? So think about that. We went from 6 to 12 to 32 trades in 2020. So clearly there's, the activity is picking up. But again, on a relative basis compared to Q4 of 2019, there were 54 trades back then. So it was a 40% decline. In terms of transaction volume, it was 2.3 billion in Q4 compared to 9.1 billion in Q4 of 2019. So that's a 75% decrease. So we can see that transaction activity is clearly moving up as time goes on. But when you look at the full year, 20 versus 19, there were 79 trades in 2020 compared to 164 in 2019. That's a 52% decline. Total transaction volume, 5.3 billion in 2020 compared to 17.7. That's a decline of 70%. And then average sale price per key, 273,000 in 2020 compared to 364,000 in 19. That's a 25% decline.
Thanks, Dan. And what about you, Eric? How would you describe the market today? Do you have anything to add on what Dan said?
Yeah, I think Dan summed it up. I would just say that, as I looked at the transactions last year and then headed into this year, almost half of them were in the economy and mid-scale chain scales. And so I think you'll see that trend continue this year, especially with the SBA debt relief that's open for the sub $10 million transactions. And then another interesting note is that a lot of non-hotel buyers are coming in the market. I think 8% of the trades last year were assets that were going to either be repositioned or turned into an alternative use. And so you've seen governments come and repurpose hotels for at-risk housing, affordable housing, and then some of the multifamily investors are looking at deals to convert into independent living or micro-unit apartments. And so I think you'll see that continue. And then I would just also mention that I think the spread between the buyers and sellers are slowly going to start to compress, and I think we'll see way more deals happening this year than last.
Alan, anything to add to that? I want to get everybody's perspective.
No, just kidding.
No.
We look at things a little bit differently. I may look at the level of distress in the industry, and I have some notes here. I think the best gauge of distress is the CMBS market, and virtually 20% of all CMBS hotel loans are in default, and that's just remarkable. That compares to 1.5% this time last year. So, the level of distress is phenomenal in the hotel industry. It's actually come down a little bit since April, when as the last several months, people have worked out forbearance agreements, but there's a forbearance cliff, right? Those 6-month, 1-year forbearance agreements are expiring. So we're going to see a lot of distressed product hit the market. And I want to pick up on something that Eric said. I think a lot of people have FOMO, right? They all want to capitalize on levels of distress. They don't want to miss out. They saw what happened in the GFC, and after 9/11, great fortunes were made. And that's what's keeping pricing up. It's still pretty competitive out there for better quality assets.
And we're going to talk about distressed assets in a bit. Duncan, did you have anything to add?
No, what we're seeing is consistent with what everyone on the panel is saying. what I will say, just to add to the distress comment, I'll save a lot of what we're going to say, but right when kind of April hit, all of our clients, all of our significant clients that have pretty significant raising capital, they're able to raise significant capital. They have all raised a bunch of distressed opportunity type funds, and the question always was, when was that going to come to market? And I think consistent again with what the rest of the panel said is that we really saw an uptick in the fourth quarter.
CJ, if I could just weigh in for 1 second on what Eric talked about vis-a-vis conversions to homeless housing. In Q4 of 2020, there were 10 significant trades in the state of California, $10 million or more. 7 out of those 10 trades were for conversion to homeless housing. And I would note that the quality of the assets that traded were good quality. These were not, crappy facilities. And I would further note that a lot of these traded at some very healthy numbers. There was a extended stay America in suburban San Francisco. I think it was in San Mateo. That traded at close to $450,000 a room for conversion to a homeless shelter. So what's interesting, I find, is that aside from hotels that have announced that they're permanently closing, you're going to see a decline in available supply because of these conversions to homeless shelters and other uses.
Was that a surprise to you that they were being traded at healthy numbers?
Was that a surprise? Well, let's face it, part of it was generated by CARES funds, right, which is government money. And is the most savvy when it comes to making investment decisions such as purchasing hotel real estate.
Right. Well, let's dig into that a little deeper and talk about federal aid. How is additional federal coronavirus relief impacting transaction activity in the market today? Is it delaying investors from acting on already distressed properties? Let's give this to Eric.
Yeah, so I'd say the new stimulus that just passed, I don't think is delaying investors. If anything, I think it's the inverse. I think it's now giving owners a little bit more hope. Even the second round PPP, there's an increase in the draw that you can get. And so I think with the vaccine rollout, there's some light at the end of the tunnel. And so I think if owners do not need to sell right now and they have the ability to generate some additional liquidity to get to, call it the summer, then I don't think that they're going to want to sell. So I think it's delaying some of the owners from potentially bringing properties to market. And so, yeah, that's the only thing I would see. But from a buyer perspective, I don't think the stimulus will delay any buy-side activity.
Yeah, Eric, I'd also add that the stimulus is deferring more aggressive actions on the part of lenders who are saying, okay, borrower, did you get your next round of PPP? Where do you stand? Where's that money? How are you going to deploy it? And if there's a solution there that includes PPP money, I think lenders are adverse to take any sort of aggressive actions.
Duncan, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I spent the first 3 months of kind of COVID happened studying PPP pretty much every day and answering questions. And it depended on the hoteler. If their partners were large institutional type funds, they were very hesitant to take the PPP money just because of the public backlash that was kind of happening, or they feared as a result of that. And then secondly, the affiliation, the lack of assurances on how the affiliation rules would work scared a lot of the hotel owners. So we really didn't see as many of our clients be aggressive on the PPP money on the first round. I think that's probably going to change on the second round because we have a little bit more history to determine how things are going to be viewed.
And if there are any distressed hotel owners watching or listening to this panel today, what would you recommend they do? What can they do to survive? And what's the long-term play for them? Dan, did you want to answer that?
Well, the bad news is that, yes, there's quite a bit of distress in the market. The good news is that I've been doing what I do for over 40 years now. I don't recall a time where there's been as much capital in the market, whether it be debt, equity, coming from not only domestically but all around the world, chasing yield, targeting commercial real estate in the United States, and then drilling down further to hotels. Because it's been proven over time that on a risk-adjusted basis, if purchased correctly, hotels provide superior returns. So I'm convinced that there are distressed situations out there. There will be distressed trades, but for the opportunities that have compelling stories around them, with all the capital that's out there, these deals are going to get bid up. So you'll end up with distressed trades, but not necessarily reflecting distressed pricing.
Alan, your thoughts?
Yeah, this down. Yeah, I obviously I always agree with Dan because he's super smart. But the
I pay him to say that.
This downturn is not coupled with a liquidity crisis, which is different from the GFC, right? I mean, there's just more money out there, so much sloshing around that people have been able to solve their problems with money. So that differentiates it from the global financial crisis. And then, of course, time will tell, but it's also not coupled with an economic downturn. And, the story is not played out yet on that. But that's causing a lot of money to flock to the market.
Eric, what about you? Any suggestions?
Yeah, I would just say that a lot of owners I've been speaking with have been looking at their portfolio as a whole, trying to understand what would be core assets, what would be non-core, and really as they formulate the business plans for this year on how to get through, maybe some non-core assets. If long term you don't believe they're going to be a good fit for the portfolio, then maybe get rid of them now. And to Dan's point, you take a good quality asset to the market in a desirable area, it may be bid up. And so, yes, you will have to sell at a discount compared to 2019, but it may not be as bad as a lot of people originally expected.
Yeah, Eric, I want to put some color on that as well, because I absolutely agree with that. You're seeing the REITs do that, right? They are pruning their portfolios. Xenia sold the Commonwealth Hotel in Boston, the Renaissance Austin. Hersha sold the Courtyard in San Diego. I mean, those are, high growth markets that traditionally have been very attractive, and they're pruning the portfolio a little bit, and obviously the other REITs are doing as well. So there's a lot of selective pruning going on. And there's also burning the furniture too.
Eric, you talked about discounts. What are those discounts looking like?
So I think when this thing first started, everyone was looking at, upwards of like 30-40% discounts compared to 2019 levels. It's been across the board. I mean, I've worked on transactions where we've had as low as like a 3% discount, and then on the other side, as high as a 40%. So I'd say it's still, it's hard to say where it's going to end up, but in my opinion, I'm thinking, roughly 25% compared to pre-COVID values is where I think it'll ultimately shake out. And the other thing it's interesting recently is our debt team has been actively talking to lenders, and it seems like financing is slowly starting to come back. If you look at the balance sheet lenders, they're at maybe 40 to 50% leverage. It's still high. It's not attractive, but it is possible. So I think once financing starts to really open up this year, that'll drive the transaction market. And surprisingly, CMBS is out there. It's not easy, but I've heard CMBS lenders are open to looking at loans.
CJ, if I could just add to that,
Sure.
it's interesting. Eric's right. Right after this, COVID became a thing. Call it March 15th. It was interesting. There was lots of prognosticators pontificating that values were down, 20 to 50%, just based on nothing, quite frankly, because nobody really knew, right? But as time has gone on, we actually have seen empirical evidence from the market to show declines. For example, Alan mentioned the Renaissance in Austin that Xenia sold. That was originally in contract in January for $100 million. It traded ultimately for $70 million, 70. So that's a 30% decline. That's the market talking. Sunstone sold the Renaissance in downtown Baltimore, $80 million. That was originally supposed to go down at $100 million. That's a 20% decline. Ashford sold the Embassy Suites in Manhattan, in New York City, 18 months after buying it at a level 40% lower than what they paid for it 18 months earlier. So now we have a 20 to 40% range. Here's a real interesting one. The Waldorf Astoria in Chicago, which is a spectacular hotel from a physical perspective, recently traded for $54 million, or about $250,000 a key. I mean, just from a pure real estate perspective and the quality of the facility, it seems like an absolute steal. What is interesting is that the last time the hotel traded, it was for more than double $54 million. It was like 113, something like that. So that's more than a 50% decline. So I think it's sort of, brackets the 20 to 50% decline that we're all talking about, and the 25% decline that I mentioned earlier on the major sales, right? But here's one interesting transaction. The Residence Inn in Pentagon City. Amazon acquired that from Blackstone for $148 million. Exactly 1 year prior, Blackstone bought it from Host Hotels and Resorts, a publicly traded REIT, for $99 million. So think about that. That's a $50 million spread, or a 50% increase during COVID. And by the way, when Blackstone bought the property a year earlier, National Landing and everything about HQ2 Amazon was already known. So nothing really changed vis-a-vis what Amazon and JBG were going to do in that market. So kind of interesting, there's a plus 50%.
Dan, out of all those transactions you've been looking at, are there any types of hotels that are changing hands more than others? Is there a chain scale segment in particular? I think Eric mentioned this a little earlier, but what are your thoughts on that?
I think it's a pretty broad mix. Yeah, I don't see anything in particular that sticks out. It's a broad mix. I mean, we're seeing extended stay Americas, all the way up to the Waldorf Astoria, and lots of stuff in between.
Eric, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'd agree with Dan. And I would just mention that I think there's a lot of buzz around extended stay hotels, and so I think those will get more popular as the year progresses, and you'll probably see some more of those trade. But yeah, I still think a lot of the limited service, select service hotels, the hotels that are performing better than the big full service assets, I think you'll see those trade more this year than the full service boxes.
Now, when it comes to evaluating potential investments today, what should investors look for in a property? How much of a role does a property's likely speed of recovery play? Alan, do you want to take that one?
I mean, that's one of the biggest issues today in financing is, you're talking about closed hotels, right? That presents unique problems for buyers and for lenders. And then the cash burn, of course, right? And the limited service, select service, it's less of an issue. But when you get to some of these bigger hotels, I mean, add to Dan's list, the Crown Plaza Times Square sold at a huge discount. That hotel is closed. That is causing an even bigger discount. But you have to have some intestinal fortitude to go after some of these bigger closed hotels with less visibility.
Your thoughts on that, Duncan?
No, I would like to go back to one question in terms of what kind of hotels are trading. You know, our clients are focused on the full service, kind of convention oriented, more urban hotels have not been nearly as active as the limited, select, extended stay hotels. And in terms of just deal flow, going back to kind of Dan's comment about definitely the bidding and the marketing is becoming very, very, very competitive and has been competitive. And our clients that have had a lot of success, fourth quarter and the start of this year, really, it's been their cost of capital has been lower than their competitors, and they're just better at finding deals. And they're the ones that have kind of not necessarily beat the market, but been able to kind of accelerate the market and had a little bit more success.
Do you expect that trend to continue, Duncan?
I do. It's continuing right now. You know, in the world that I live in, mostly Southeast Atlanta, the clients have had a lot of success in kind of off-market deals with local banks that don't want to acknowledge that they're getting out of the market, and they've kind of rotated transactions either directly with borrowers or selling the notes, and it's just that market. A lot of people have tried to get into it. Some of our other clients, the majority of our clients, and what I found again, the capital and the people that have been able to have relationships with those banks that they've worked on over a period of years, they've had a lot more success.
Duncan, I just want to stay on you for the next question. What type of due diligence is being done for loan acquisitions? Anything out of the ordinary, or is it more of the same?
It's different. It's definitely a different transaction, typically because you have to close in a week or 2 weeks, and the banks typically are not. They believe that your risk is assessed in the reduction of the unpaid principal, so that's kind of built into the deal, and so you're not getting much in terms of protection from your seller, which would be the banks. So the diligence you're able to do, you're typically not allowed to talk to borrowers. You're not allowed to talk to, you're not allowed to go to the hotel. So the underwriting is gathering as much data that you can outside of what the bank files, but also collecting the bank files and learning the hotel story, understanding what the, making sure you do title searches, make sure you your research on you do your UCC searches, making sure you understand the borrower, get as much information as you can on the guarantors, and that's really kind of what we try to do, and we've done this. We did a lot back in the Great Recession, and doing it all over again now is understanding the loan story. Obviously, figuring out the enforceability of the loan documents, talking to local counsel, making sure you can foreclose, have to, and then you kind of work your way to creating, just like I said, the larger story of the loan and the borrower and the guarantors. So it's a different model than just kind of understanding the real estate, what the web par is, getting your STAR report. I mean, that kind of information you can get from historical data, but you really got to kind of just understand the loan.
Is that process?
Yeah, Duncan, I'd also add.
I'm sorry.
I was just going to add from Duncan, one of the big pivots has been more desktop review, less kicking the tires, right? We're talking to more and more buyers that say, had you seen the hotel? They're like, no, we did everything desktop and we're ready to close, right? And you scratch your heads and, wonder how that could happen. But I don't know, Dan, how close you were to the Colony transaction. I don't think that Highgate saw any of the hotels before they closed. When they bought all the big select service portfolios.
Well, as you know, Alan, I'm involved in the one portfolio that Highgate is not buying. My understanding of the other 5 portfolios is that the deal has not closed as of yet. So, and I'm hearing all sorts of things about it. lots of rumor. So, I think that, the deal is supposed to close, I think, any day now. But, yeah, I don't have any further comment on that.
But on digital assets,
it's a lot of market knowledge. It's getting into figuring out, talking to the brokers in that market and understanding. But it's a lot of phone calls. It's not, you can't get somebody to go do a property condition report on those hotels. That's just not an option. So there's a little there's a little bit of blind faith, but understanding the people, understanding the market is what they try to concentrate on.
And what about change of ownership PIPs? Eric, what is the current buyer sentiment on completing extensive change of ownership PIPs?
Yeah, so what we've seen is that the franchises are still requiring the buyers to complete the PIPs. So on several of the PIPs that we've gotten on the transactions we've worked at, they're just like they were 2-3 years ago. So not much has changed on the scope of the PIP. What we have seen is the buyers have been able to negotiate the timelines. So, some of them have been able to get, instead of 12 months, maybe 16 months, maybe it's 24 months. And so it seems like the franchises are still requiring the CapEx, just delaying the time that it takes to implement them.
Do you think that's pretty much going to stay the same, Eric, or do you think that's going to change? They're going to open up a little bit more on those requirements, or no?
It's hard to say right now. I think maybe, it depends on how quickly we rebound this year. If things don't get better by the second half, maybe they start to lighten the PIPs a little bit. But, as of now, I'm seeing them, still the same.
Alan, your thoughts?
The brands still are tough. They're doing all the PIPs remotely now, as far as I can tell. So I don't know if that means they're going to miss things or the potential to miss things. I worry about that risk. But I think the brands, the consistent message is they have brand standards. They want to enforce them at some point, not right now, but, later, whatever that means.
I think that when you look back at the lodging industry over time, it's unfortunately been very reactive as opposed to proactive vis-a-vis embracing technology. And I do believe that once this is all said and done, in terms of the pandemic, that the sector is going to actually be ahead of the curve when it comes to technology. And when the pandemic is all said and done, I think you're going to see brand standards alter vis-a-vis embracing technology. Like Marriott's now requiring the keyless entry to your guest room by telephone, right? Which is kind of interesting because that technology has been available for a couple of years now, and previously it was reserved for elite, travelers within their frequent traveler programs. Now everybody's going to get it. I'm not really sure why it was only reserved for the elite as opposed to, everybody. Touchless everything is the name of the game these days. And, as soon as one brand family comes up with a standard that implements and embraces all the technology that's currently available today, I think you're going to see every other brand family fall in right behind them. And the bottom line is that's going to cost money, and owners are going to have to buck up to retrofit their properties.
Just to go off the brands conversation, Alan, if I remember correctly, and I could be wrong, but I believe I saw some on your data that a lot of independent hotels have closed compared to other chain scales. Does this reveal the importance of having a brand with the property?
I'm not sure you can draw any conclusions from that. I think when you look at the sector, it's clear that I think 15% of all full service hotels have closed, and you only have like 3% of economy and limited service. So I think it seems to be more of if you look at it that way, the brands don't help because you have obviously a lot of full service brands. So I'm not sure I would draw any conclusions, but that is, closed hotels is something I've never experienced in my career. Dan obviously has a much longer career. I don't think he's experienced that either. And that's, particularly troubling. We need to get obviously hotels open, people back to work and and lenders paid.
You know, you need to be a little bit careful when you talk about brands too, because you know, every new independent hotel is a new brand, right? And you
A
know,
brand of one.
are you talking about soft brand, hard brand? You know, it's kind of all over the place. Here's something else that's kind of amazing. During the past year, since COVID began, there's been introduced 9 additional new brands into the sector. I mean, I find that mind-boggling.
Yeah. Wow. So we have about 5 more minutes left for the discussion. So I kind of want to just get see where everybody's at, how optimistic they are for the second half of the year. Are you optimistic about it? What type of concerns do you have? And is there anything that could potentially derail the hospitality business again? Dan, why don't we start with you?
Wow, that's a loaded question. What could derail the hospitality industry again? I mean, listen, you know, hotels are a unique asset class vis-a-vis commercial real estate, right? You don't have any long-term creditworthy tenancies, right? It's daily leasing of guest rooms. And with technology being what it is, pricing of those units literally changes by the nanosecond, right? Unlike office buildings that have long-term, you know, many times creditworthy tenancies. So, you know, the lodging industry, that's a beautiful thing, by the way, that concept in an up market. In a down market, it kills you, just like we've been experiencing, right? So let's face it, the sector is very vulnerable to black swan events and immediate vulnerability to them, right? And if you recall, pre-COVID, everybody was on edge. There's going to be a black swan event. There's going to be, but nobody knew what it was, right? Now we know, in fact, what it is. So there clearly is risk of something that we can't even imagine at this point, right? Happening. You know, as far as predicting back half of the year, first half of the year, I don't know. You tell me when COVID is truly in the rearview mirror, and then I can give you timing as to the rebound. From a higher level, though, whenever, and listen, we will get past this, right? And when we do, I do believe that travel, all types of travel, is really going to come back with a vengeance and very quickly, whether it be corporate business, conventions, leisure. We already saw it demonstrated this past summer. You know, this Zoom thing is great, but let's face it, everybody's kind of done with it. Zoom's not going to go away. I think, and if there's another technology that's been around, I mean, video technology has been around for 20, 30 years, right? Sure. Skype has been around for forever, right? And you know, when COVID hit, then all of a sudden Zoom became a new thing. It really wasn't so new, but I think it's going to continue to be embraced, you know, by folks who maybe were taking unnecessary trips from a business perspective, right? And could do what needed to be done on a Zoom call. But generally speaking, you know, listen, every time there's a calamity, it seems like we come back bigger and better at some point. How long that takes is, I don't know.
Duncan, what about your closing thoughts? Everybody else has about 30 seconds or so left.
Okay, I'll be quick. I agree with Dan. A lot of professional organizations, a lot of business had better years than they thought they were going to have. And the only reason why is because they effectively cut costs and travel, marketing, expense counts. That's not a good way to build a business, by cutting costs, cutting expenses. So I think people are going to get back to traveling, get back to going to visit clients. And I think, you know, when the vaccine's over, that will come back sooner than we think.
Eric?
Yeah, I'll just share my thoughts on the brokerage perspective. So, you know, I think in the previous downturn, you either had to have, you had to sacrifice price for certainty of execution as far as getting deals done. I think this time it's going to be much different. I think you can get certainty of execution and price. And so I think that's going to fuel the market moving forward. A lot of creative deals are going to get done with assuming financing similar to the Highgate Colony portfolio. So yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting market this year.
Alan, less than 30 seconds.
Okay, so I'm not an epidemiologist, but look, this is an industry of eternal optimists, right? I think the big challenge is making sure that travel is relevant again, right? We're now competing with technology. Marriott's not competing with Hilton, they're competing with Airbnb, and they're competing with Zoom and other platforms, right? So we need to make sure that travel, business travel, is relevant. We get people out there touching and feeling each other and hugging, and make sure that the government, like they did after 9/11, can assure the traveling public that it's safe to do so again. And I think that is the issues in front of us. Alice and AHLA have taken a position on that. Alice is going ahead in, I think, July. It's important that we demonstrate as an industry that we can meet, it's safe to do so. And I look forward to seeing everyone there.
Thank you to all of our panelists. It was a very lively discussion, and thank you to everybody watching and listening at home. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Thanks, DJ.
Bye.
Thank you all for joining us today for Hotel Optimization Part 3. Thank you also to our panelists, our sponsors, and AHOA. Stay tuned for more information about June's in-person event in Florida, and have a great rest of your day.